Chapter 1, Chapter I, The Fall and the Rise. Early 270 AC. The fall was not from a cliff or a tower, but from the back of a galloping sand steed. They had been racing across the dunes beyond the water gardens. Oberyn's laughter echoed in the wind, loud and wild, like he always was when they slipped away from their guards. Mors leaned forward on the saddle, widening his lead on his cousin, Manfredi, while pushing his mount to catch up to Oberyn. His mount caught an unseen dip in the earth and stumbled. Mors was thrown. There was a crack. He didn't get up. They carried him back limp and bleeding, sand in his hair, his eyes closed. The guards didn't meet each other's eyes. Maesters worked in silence. Elia paced the corridor outside, her hands clenched while Manfredi stayed silent in a corner. Dornish stayed in the room, his face unreadable, his eyes fixed on the rise and fall of Mors's chest. By nightfall, they weren't sure if the boy would live. Elia didn't sleep that night. Neither did Dornish. Oberyn didn't come inside at all. He trained with Manfredi until they collapsed from exhaustion, then rose and trained again. On the third day, Dornish sat beside the bed, his head bowed. The air was thick with silence. Mors had been breathing barely but unresponsive. A low candle flickered beside him, casting long shadows on the stone walls. Elia lay asleep with her head resting on the edge of the bed, exhaustion etched into every line of her body. Then, Mors stirred. "You're awake," Dornish said, voice low and taut, as if afraid to disturb the fragile moment. He leaned in slightly, eyes wide, watching for another sign. Mors blinked. His mouth felt like sand. "What? Where?" Dornish straightened, startled, then eased down closer again. "How do you feel? Can you move? Can you feel your body?" Mors winced slightly, his voice rough. "Feels heavy. Everything heavy." His eyes settled on Dornish. "You? Dornish?" "Yes. Dornish." A slight smile broke across Dornish's face. Relief washed through him. "Here, drink some water," he said, lifting the cup carefully and helping him sip. When Mors finished, Dornish let out the breath he'd been holding for days. "I'll get Oberyn. He's been in the training yard all day. He blames himself." "Why?" Mors rasped. Dornish paused. "He challenged you to the race. Since then, he's done nothing but train. He hasn't forgiven himself. A beat passed. Mother arrived from Sun's Pair yesterday. She's been very worried." Mors's brow furrowed, confusion flickering across his features. "Do you remember anything?" Dornish asked gently. Mors fell silent for a moment. Then, slowly, "The race, yes. I remember now." He glanced down beside him, seeing Elia still asleep at his side. He looked back to Dornish. "Elia, right?" "Yes," Dornish said softly. "Your older sister. She's been here since the first day. We've all taken shifts. But she wouldn't leave." Mors reached out weakly, brushing his fingers through Elia's hair. He looked back toward the ceiling, fingers twitching as if searching for something lost. "I'm remembering, tell them I'm fine." Dornish's face tightened. "You nearly died." "Did I?" There was no drama in the question, just curiosity. Dornish rose to leave, but paused at the door. He glanced back once more, the weight of days heavy in his eyes. "We thought you wouldn't wake." And then he slipped out. Later that day, after Mors had woken from another nap, Oberyn came in with Manfredi covered in sweat and dust. His shirt was soaked through, hands blistered from overtraining. He didn't speak at first. Just looked at Mors as if unsure he was real. Then he punched Mors lightly in the arm. "You reckless fool," Oberyn muttered. "That's rich coming from you. Besides, I recall that it was you who challenged me," Mors croaked. "I didn't think you'd actually try to win." Mors gave a weak smile. Neither did I. Oberyn sat and dropped his head into his hands. Manfredi remained standing close, his expression tight. I haven't slept. Haven't stopped training either. I thought I killed you. I've seen and felt the result firsthand, Manfredi muttered with a wry smile. Oberyn, you didn't, Mors said. And if I'd died, it wouldn't have been your fault. Tell that to my head, Oberyn muttered. Then tell your head to rest. Though still troubled, Oberyn chuckled, you sound like Doran. Why does it suddenly feel like you're the older brother? Mors shrugged. Do I? Maybe the fall knocked something loose. Oberyn looked at him again, more carefully this time. I'm just glad you're safe. Me too. I thought you were dead when you hit the ground, Manfredi offered. Mors held their gaze. That race didn't count. Oberyn snorted. Fair enough. He paused. We will look into a rematch after you get better. Just be ready to lose again. I won't. Mors replied with a grimaced smile. By the next morning, Mors was walking slowly through the gardens. He paused at the fountains more often. Not to admire them, he was listening. Feeling. Something was different. His senses felt more alive, more active. He started paying attention to everything around him. To how the wind moved. To how people walked. To the way water curved when it hit stone. There was a rhythm to the world he hadn't noticed before, and now it sang to him like it always had, and he had just never known how to hear it. His instructors noticed first. He no longer interrupted lessons. He no longer rushed through drills. He'd always been sharp, but now his focus was unshakable. Almost like he suddenly matured. When the Septa asked about the Roynish Wars, he recited dates and alliances with precision she didn't expect. He traced out the politics of Nymaria's voyage in chalk before she could turn the page. His mind was too sharp almost. He could tell the difference, because one day he remembered being one way and the next different. When the Master-at-Arms told him to sit this one out, he refused. When instructed to strike, Mors didn't charge. He waited. 1 breath. 2. Watched. Then moved. And landed it. Again, the Master-at-Arms had said, this time with narrowed eyes. And again, Mors waited, read the weight of his opponent's front foot, the drop in his shoulder, and struck before the blow ever came. After a couple of days, word began to spread. The youngest son of Princess Lorza had changed. Some said the fall knocked sense into him. Others whispered darker things. Elia slapped one of her handmaidens for repeating such talk. You're not as loud, Elia said that night as they sat in the courtyard, watching the sunset spill gold across the stone. Her hand was in his. She passed him a fig but didn't take one for herself. I should be happy about it, but I'm not sure what to make of it. Mors's gaze lingered on the horizon, thoughtful. I'm not sure either. Maybe I'm just tired, still recovering. Maybe, she said softly. You used to laugh first, stumble second, then laugh again. Now you think first. Really? He glanced at her. I hadn't noticed. Hey. That's weird. He turned back to the sky. I've been thinking a lot lately. Things that never made sense, suddenly do. Elia tilted her head slightly, concern in her eyes. Is your head still hurting? If there's anything at all you need to talk about, don't hold it in. Come to me. Always. She reached up and stroked his hair gently, pressing a kiss to his brow. I will, sister, Mors murmured. Elia smiled, content for now. Good. The next afternoon, his mother summoned him. Princess Lorza stood at the edge of the balcony, her gaze fixed on the gardens below. Her robes hung like armor, her posture regal, though the lines of her face were drawn with weariness. You frightened us, she said without turning. I didn't mean to, Mors replied, standing tall despite being intimidated by his mother. It was an accident. I don't ever want to go through that again or put any of you through it. Lorza turned slowly and studied him. Good. At least you learned your lesson. You were very fortunate. She stopped herself, not wanting to continue that line of thought, but she shifted course instead. Doran tells me you've changed, she said at last. That you've come back with more maturity to you. I suppose I have, Mors said. She narrowed her eyes slightly, a flicker of warmth beneath the scrutiny. People don't change like this. Not at 10. Don't try to be more than you have to, Mors. Childhood doesn't return once it's spent. Mors met her gaze, steady. I'll try. But most children don't fall like I did and stand again. Lorza held his eyes a moment longer, then nodded and stepped forward. She pulled him into a tight embrace. Good. Perhaps the fall knocked some sense into you. It did more than that. She stepped back, one hand lingering on his shoulder. Your father would be proud, she said quietly. He always said dragon's blood burns too hot, made many of them reckless. Maybe now it burns more steadily in you. Mors didn't answer, but the words rooted themselves deeper than he expected. Chapter 2, The Boy Who Woke. 2 weeks later. The sea never shuts up. Mors sat on the palace terrace, staring past Sunspear's golden rooftops into the roiling blue. Waves lapped against the coast in lazy rhythm, like the world itself was breathing just to annoy him. Peaceful. Serene. Mocking. He'd been back on his feet for weeks now. Far sooner than anyone expected. Even the Septons were starting to call him Blessed of the Seven in hushed tones, while the Maester observed him with unusual curiosity. The constant checks had been chipping away at his patience until he overruled them and forced them to stop their checkups. Blessed. Sure. Let's call it that. I won't be able to marry anymore, he muttered with a mock shudder, remembering how anime protagonists always overreacted to this sort of thing. Right, I won't be able to watch anime anymore. He pressed his fingers to his temple and let out a slow breath. The memories were back now. All of them. Like someone crammed them into his skull and downloaded someone else's life. Except that someone was him? It was him, right? A past version maybe. This was as confusing as it was ridiculous. Regardless, he didn't just remember who he was, he remembered where he was. This is Westeros. Game of Thrones. That was the name, right? A show. A damn TV show. Fiction. Except this feels awfully real, doesn't it? He thought, clenching his fist. He gave a humorless chuckle. I died and got reincarnated into premium cable. That name felt ridiculous now, echoing in his head like the punchline to a joke only he understood. He hadn't even watched the whole thing, just one season. Maybe 2, if he counted the random episodes he'd caught while bored. That was it. And barely that. He'd always been more of a casual viewer, just enough to follow conversations and recognize spoilers. Wasn't there a book as well? Mors sighed, while rubbing his temples. I really hope this world is based off the show. Mors threw up his hands, exasperated. How the hell does this even happen? He snatched up a stone and hurled it as far as he could into the sea, the splash distant, unsatisfying. The days since the accident had been a blur, a convoluted mess of half-formed thoughts and strange clarity. It felt like he was seeing the world through an adult's eyes, but still reacting with the emotions of a 10-year-old. Everything was off. Fortunately, everyone chalked up his dazed confusion to the fall. A head injury. Trauma. Recovery. It wasn't until yesterday that his mind finally began to settle. That's when he started to put it together. At first, he almost convinced himself he was hallucinating, seeing patterns where there were none. The names. The places. The banners. They tugged at his memory in that eerie, déjà vu kind of way. Like walking into a dream you didn't know you'd forgotten. And then came the kicker. Last night, as Doran sat discussing potential matches for Elia, casually naming lords and heirs from across the realm, everything clicked. His sister. Elia Martell. He had heard that name before, and not from his 10 years of memories in this world. It came from before. From a conversation, maybe. Some expert rambling about the series. Her fate had struck a nerve even then. His gut clenched. He remembered. Not clearly, but enough to feel sick. She died. No, she was murdered. Her children too. Something horrific. He hadn't seen the episode, he'd barely made it through the first season, but the story had spread like wildfire. Bar talk. Meme culture. Man, the Red Viper's sister got done dirty. Something about a silver-haired Prince Rhaegar, dumping her for some northern girl, sparking a war. And her kids, her children were butchered. That part stuck. That part hurt. Mors clenched his fists until his knuckles throbbed. Intellectually, he understood he was no longer the same person he had once been. But the memories, the warmth of Elia's hand in his, her quiet voice at his bedside, the way she watched over him with worry and affection, those weren't so easy to dismiss. They were real. Too real. So imagining that fate. No, I can't allow that to happen. He wouldn't let it happen. He couldn't. Despite her frailty, Elia was kind. Warm. Sharper than most gave her credit for. She saw what others missed, quiet details, subtle shifts in tone. And she always reached out first, even when she had the most to lose. She didn't deserve to be reduced to a footnote in someone else's tragedy. She was alive now, laughing in the gardens, stitching banners with careful fingers, speaking of futures she didn't yet know would be stolen. And Mors would see that future protected. Not if I can help it. But how long did he have? She was already nearing marriageable age, and this was the bloody medieval era. Girls were betrothed before their moon blood stopped surprising them. A political match could happen any day. What if the offer came soon? What if the crown reached out? What if it was already happening behind closed doors? Gods! I should have watched more of that damn show. Everything felt like smoke in his fingers, fragments of half-spoiled trivia. He knew Rhaegar was involved. Actually, I remember meeting him 5 years ago. And the King Aerys. Yeah, that was some crazy behind his eyes, no doubt. Knew Elia died. Knew Oberyn went on a vengeance mission. He remembered some smug co-worker spoiling it, laughing over wings and beer. He monologues too long and gets his skull popped like a grape. Classic. Right. Oberyn dies too. He could still see the bastard grinning while sparring, spinning that damn spear like he was showing off for a lover. Oberyn couldn't die like that. Not in some glorious failure. Not because he got cocky trying to avenge Elia. Not if Mors could stop it. But he had no roadmap. Just scraps. He hurled another stone into the ocean. Then he looked down at his hands. This isn't normal. A child shouldn't be this strong. This was something else. Something different. It had started after the accident. That fall should have crippled him. By all rights, he should have been broken, bent, or buried. But within days, he was walking again. Running. Sparring. Winning. Healing. Faster than I should. Too fast. His body didn't just recover. It got better. Stronger. Leaner. Quicker. And it wasn't just the healing. His reflexes had sharpened. His awareness, too. He could predict strikes before they came, adjust mid-motion, move like the ground was part of him. Enhanced instincts. Like I've been training for years. He remembered sparring with Oberyn and Manfredi last week. The moment their spears clashed, he had felt it, a current, a beat, like music only he could hear. He won those matches, caught Oberyn by surprise and edged out a victory, then outlasted Manfredi. He lost the bouts that followed, but he'd never come that close before. Oberyn was surprised. Mors had always been gifted, but his growth had followed a steady, if unremarkable, path, natural, even slow at times. But this was different. He still lost more than he won, mostly due to age and reach, but something had changed. The way he moved, the precision of his strikes, it felt like he'd taken a leap forward, skipping steps no 10-year-old should. "You've been holding out on us, little brother," Oberyn had said, panting through a smile tinged with suspicion. "Since when were your attacks so ruthless?" Mors had blinked, genuinely confused. He hadn't been thinking, just moving. "I don't know, Oberyn," he'd replied. "Ever since the accident, I just feel more focused. Openings stand out clearer. Like I see them before they happen. Once I figure it out, I'll let you know." Oberyn had only nodded. He didn't press. But Mors could see it, the worry, buried under charm and bravado. His brother always noticed more than he let on. But the truth was, he didn't know himself. The limits of whatever power he carried were unclear. Only that it was growing. Slowly. Silently. Like a fire stoked by every heartbeat. "It feels familiar. But I can't place it. Like something from another show. A game, maybe? Something I saw once and forgot." It was like trying to recall a dream you never quite woke up from. Every time he tried to grasp it, it slipped through his fingers. He didn't know what to call it, but it was in him, woven through his muscles and bones like light made solid. It felt like armor under the skin. Like something was always humming beneath his chest, ready to answer the call. He was stronger. Faster. Thinking more clearly and quicker, even. And maybe, just maybe, he could grow powerful enough to stop what was coming. Because it was coming. He didn't know the timeline, but he felt it in his gut. Elia's marriage. Rhaegar's betrayal. Robert's rebellion. The war. The fire. The dragons. Zombies, or whatever those things were. That was in the opening. Had to mean something. Oh, I absolutely can't forget. The mountain. 7 hells. He didn't even know how old Gregor Clegane was right now. Was he already out there, torturing servants and killing for sport? Would he end up Elia's executioner again if nothing changed? No. Not again. He wouldn't sit still. Wouldn't let fate fold around him like a script already written. He had time. He had warning. He had power, or at least, something growing inside him. And he had been born into a noble house with influence. But he was still too young to wield it. That needs to change. I need a voice. He would change this story. Even if it killed him again. Not her. Not Oberyn. Not anyone I can still save. Chapter 3, The Water Hears. 3 weeks after the fall. The Water Gardens of Dorne were built as a haven of peace and equality, a place where children of all stations, noble and small folk alike, could rest and play among the fountains, pools, and shaded paths. But for Mors, peace had become a torment. He stood at the edge of a shallow pool, barefoot, the water cool against his skin. Children laughed in the background, splashing and shrieking, their joy echoing off sandstone columns. Servants moved like whispers in the breeze, bringing fruit and cushions to shaded alcoves. It was a place meant for stillness, but his thoughts refused to be quiet. He exhaled slowly, watching the ripple his toes made in the water. It's like I'm living in the eye of the storm. Everything looks calm, but the edges are moving. Fast. His hand flexed at his side, willing that hum beneath his skin to respond. There was no shimmer. No glowing light. No dramatic surge of magic. Just the steady beat of his heart and the feeling of fullness. Wholeness might be a better word. It pulsed through him, stronger by the day. But it remained vague. Undefined but always on. If I heal so quickly, I should be able to build muscle faster, right? Footsteps approached familiar, measured. Doran. You've been quiet today, Doran said, his voice warm and observant. Mors didn't turn. He kept his feet moving slowly in the shallow pool, watching the ripples scatter. I've had a lot on my mind lately. Doran stopped beside him, hands folding behind his back. Having a lot on your mind isn't reason enough to isolate yourself. He paused. Is it the pain? From the fall? More like a rebirth than pain. Mors shook his head. No. I feel fine. Better than fine. He hesitated. Stronger than I should. Doran glanced down at him, brow lifting. Stronger how? I tire slower. I react faster. And when I spar, it's like I've trained longer than I actually have. He glanced sideways at his brother. It's not normal, is it? Doran studied him for a long moment. No. But then again, neither is surviving that kind of fall from a galloping horse. He paused, voice lowering to a near whisper. Maybe it's the Targaryen blood mixing with the Royner line. But Mors heard him clearly. They stood in silence for a moment, broken only by distant laughter and the splash of a fountain. I want to return to Sun's pair, Mors said suddenly. Doran blinked. Already? We've been here months. It's peaceful, yes. But too peaceful. I need to be closer to the court. Closer to the world. Doran turned to face him fully. Mors, you're 10. He let out a quiet sigh. You should be laughing, climbing trees, getting into trouble. Not brooding over politics and the future. I won't be 10 forever, Mors said seriously, though the sight of such gravity on a child's face made Doran smile. A quiet chuckle escaped him, amusement flickering in his eyes. No, you won't, he agreed, placing a hand on Mors's shoulder. But there's time enough for the games of politics later. Time isn't on our side. You just don't know it yet. Mors thought. Mors didn't respond, just stared at the rippling surface of the water. Doran shifted gears. Then tell me, why do you want to be back in Sun's pair? To learn, Mors said with mock sincerity. I want to help Mother, and begin being useful to you, our ever-wise, soon-to-be Prince of Dorne. He flashed a grin, but the intention behind the words felt real. The both chuckled at that. Then Mors turned serious. And to know what's being decided while I'm left playing in the water. Ah, Doran said quietly. So this is about Elia. About that conversation the other night. Mors stiffened slightly. What have you heard? Doran gave him a measured look. Nothing certain. Political marriages are always delicate. There are possibilities being explored, but interests still need to align. Nothing is confirmed. He paused, then asked, why does this trouble you? Because I've seen the future, brother. And it doesn't bode well for us. Because I want her safe, Mors said aloud. She's too important to be used as a pawn. Elia's frail. I don't want her to suffer. Doran sighed, his expression softening. I know. Believe me, I've argued more than once that she should have a say in it. Mors turned toward him, eyes sharper than they should have been for a boy his age. Do you, he asked. Have a say, I mean. When it comes to her marriage. Doran's gaze hardened. Not as much as I'd like, he admitted. Mother still rules. And the lords on the council, they're eager to see Dorne rise through a powerful alliance. They see Elia as our best piece on the board. Of course they do. They'll do anything to improve their standings and situation. And what of you? Mors asked, shifting. Do they have someone lined up for you as well? Doran gave a dry chuckle. There have been several attempts. None have worked out. But I doubt this can be delayed much longer. And what about me? Mors asked, hesitantly. Doran glanced at him, amused. You're still too young. Not for long. The moment I turn 12, they'll start eyeing Tyrell daughters or Volantine cousins. Doran's smile faded. You're not wrong. Silence settled between them again. Mors reached down, scooping a handful of water and letting it stream through his fingers, cool, fleeting, impossible to hold. I want to join the Spears, Mors said. Doran actually laughed. Ah, so that's what this is really about. This is why you want to return to Sun's pair. He chuckled again, shaking his head. You? The Spears of the Sun? Planning to squire for Uncle Lewin now, are you? I'm serious, Mors said, meeting his brother's gaze without flinching. Doran's smile lingered, but his tone turned more measured. And once again, in case you've forgotten, you're 10. And I'll be 11 soon. You joined court duties at that age. Elia was writing speeches. Oberyn was already fighting better than most guards. I need to do more. Doran gave him a long, thoughtful look. Lewin is their commander. He's strict. Harsh even. Are you sure? He's the best fighter in our family not named Oberyn. If I'm going to survive what's coming, I need real training. Yes. Let me start. Even just physical training. Let me prove I'm not wasting time here. Doran studied him for a moment longer before speaking. I'll bring it up with Mother, Doran said at last. Though it won't be an easy sell. You know how protective she is. He paused, considering. If she agrees, and that's a big if, we can speak to Uncle Lewin. But even then, it's up to him. He'll want to assess you himself. At most, you'd begin drills. No promises beyond that. That's all I need, Mors replied, finally exhaling. The tension seemed to melt from his shoulders. Just a chance. Doran studied Mors's reaction carefully, then added. You'll have to wait though, the Spears are in the Prince's Pass, mediating renewed tensions between House Yeronwood and House Fowler. Oh, them again. This rivalry is never going away, is it? Mors sighed and said. Always Yeronwood and Fowler. Proud banners, old grudges, and no end in sight. Doran chuckled, but turned serious. With enough interest, or power, anything can happen. They stood in silence for another moment, watching the children laugh and splash in the shallow pools. Then Doran turned to Mors, his voice quieter. You really have changed since your fall. I've changed since my death. It seems so, Mors said instead. Doran began to walk away, but paused at the first step. One more thing, Mors called after him. Doran turned. When we return to Sun's pair, I want to sit in on council meetings. Even if I just listen. His brows lifted, caught between surprise and concern. Mors. Please, Mors said, almost a whisper. There was a pause. Then Doran sighed, the weight of too many responsibilities echoing in the sound. I'll consider it, he said quietly. Just, try to be a child a little longer. Growing up is harder than you think. He gave Mors one last look before turning down the corridor. Mors exhaled slow and steady, only then realizing he'd been holding his breath. The sun glinted off the water, blinding him for a second. He looked down again at his reflection. Same silver hair. Same violet eyes. And something else behind them now. Purpose. This is the start. At least Doran was willing to accommodate my request. But did I push too hard? He stepped back from the water, drying his feet on a cloth laid beside the pool. The wind smelled of salt and citrus. The water gardens murmured behind him the sound of children laughing and water splashing. But Mors Martell had stopped listening. He had begun planning. Preparing, and though it began with a small pebble Doran, it was still action. And now he would continue to take action as he walked away from the pools. I wonder if Oberyn and Manfredi are up for some additional sparring. Mors mused. End of Prelude Awakening. Chapter 4, Interlude, Blood and Water. Sun's Pair. POV Mors Martell. The words dropped like a blade into her chest. He might not make it. Princess Mors Martell did not flinch. Not in front of her court. Not when her first husband died from wounds taken fighting pirates in the Stepstones. Not even when her second husband and best friend perished in the tragedy at Summerhall, just as she'd begun to care for him more than a friend. She had never allowed herself to break. But now as her brother's voice faded into silence her knees wanted to follow. She stood high above Sun's Pair in the eastern solar, still as stone, robes heavy with titles she'd never asked for. Tell me everything, Maron. Prince Mors Martell bowed his head, the usual calm in his voice replaced by tension. Thrown from his mount. He hit the ground hard. Head and neck injuries. The maesters suspect swelling in the spine, but they're not certain. He hasn't woken since. Lorza exhaled. Slowly. Carefully. Her fingers curled around the marble edge of the table. Where? The dunes near the water gardens. He was racing Oberyn and Manfredi. Of course he was, she snapped. Her voice cracked. Of course Oberyn goaded him into it. And no one thought to stop them? Not a single guard said, perhaps not, my prince is not across shifting dunes without saddles. Maron stepped forward. Sister Lorza. This isn't the time for blame. No. Her voice rose, sharp and ragged. Then when? After I've buried another husband? Another child? Her composure cracked. First father. Then Luwin. Then that fire that took Sweet Durin. She choked on the name. Her voice became a whisper wrapped in thorns. If Mors dies, if he dies. Her hands shook. I won't survive it. Maron placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. He's still breathing. That means there's still hope. She turned toward him, eyes red but defiant. He is my youngest. He grew up without a father. He carries all we've lost. His blood is fire and river or ice, as Durin used to joke. Dragon and Roiner. Her voice dropped, trembling. If the gods want to take him now, they'll have to drag me with him. Maron gently turned her from the window. Then don't let them. His voice was quiet but firm. Don't feed your fear. Let the maesters work. Let the gods be silent. You breathe. She shook her head. She couldn't speak. You need to be by his side, he said gently. I'll remain here. I'll see to everything else. Her lips pressed together, trembling with something between rage and despair. But first, you must rest, Maron continued. You're no use to him, shattered. And Lorza, remember who he is. He is a Martell. He has Targaryen fire in his blood, Roynish resilience in his bones. He will rise. I believe that. For the first time, she let herself lean into him. Just a little. Then believe for both of us, she whispered. Until I can again. Water Gardens Training Grounds. POV 2 Oberyn Martell. The sparring yard was blistered with heat and fury. Oberyn struck, missed. Manfredi countered. Oberyn stumbled. Again. The clash of their wooden spears echoed hollow and false. Nothing landed right. No balance, no rhythm. No control. You're dropping your back foot again, Manfredi snapped. Don't tell me what I'm doing wrong, Oberyn hissed, circling. Then stop doing it. They crashed together again. 1, 2, 3 strikes, then the master-at-arms barked, enough. The spears clattered to the ground. You want to kill each other, the old knight growled, stepping between them. Because you're well on your way. This isn't a game. This is steel in your belly training. And you, he jabbed a finger at Oberyn, are swinging like a drunk sellsword. Oberyn breathed hard through clenched teeth. Sweat stung his eyes. His hands were blistered, skin torn open from training without gloves. But he didn't care. Get out of the sun, the knight snapped. Drink. Rest. Get your heads on straight before you end up in the healer's tent next to your little brother. That landed like a punch. Oberyn's jaw tightened, but he said nothing as he turned away. Manfredi followed, silent. They sat in the shade beside the sparring circle. A servant passed a flask of water, which Oberyn barely touched. He's not dead, Manfredi said quietly. He's still breathing. He wouldn't be there if it weren't for me, Oberyn bit back. You didn't throw him off the horse. I dared him to. I laughed as we raced. I should have been the one who fell. I should have. You were riding beside him, not dragging him behind, Manfredi said. He made his own choice. Oberyn shook his head, jaw clenched. He's 10. I was supposed to be watching him. Not treating him like another rider. Like another guard. Manfredi didn't answer. Just passed him the flask again. Oberyn took it this time. Drank deeply. Then stared out at the red stone walls, eyes dark with guilt. If he dies, he said, voice low, I will never forgive myself. Water Gardens Mors's room. POV 3 Doran Martell. The chamber was still, save for the rustle of Elia's silks as she shifted, curled beside the bed. Her head rested on her arm, face tear-streaked, but quiet now. Doran stood behind her, near the foot of the bed, watching the slow rise and fall of Mors's chest. Every breath felt like a battle won. Every shallow exhale a tremor. Maesters whispered behind him. Poultices were changed. A cooling cloth pressed to the boy's brow. Doran did not speak. He had always been the careful one. The steady hand. The observer. The heir who planned while others played. But now? He had not planned for this. His youngest brother lay still and pale and silent. And Doran, Crown Prince of Dorne, could do nothing. Elia's fingers twitched, brushing Mors's hand. He's strong, Doran said softly. She didn't look up, just nodded. He has more fight in him than any boy his age. You'll see. He'll come back. I don't want him to fight, she whispered. I just want him to live. Doran closed his eyes for a long moment. So do I. But I should have guided him better. I should have said no to the race. Should have taught him caution. Should have. He opened them again and let the guilt fade back into silence. There would be time to examine his failings later. For now, all that mattered was the boy in the bed. Rest, Elia, he said. I'll watch him. She didn't argue. Just lay her head beside Mors again. And Doran stood sentinel in the flickering candlelight, willing the boy to breathe again. Chapter 5, Chapter 4, A Seat at the Table. Sun's pair 4 weeks after the fall. The sun cast a sharp gold over Sunspear's high towers as Mors dismounted just outside the courtyard gates. The familiar scent of sun-warmed sandstone and citrus filled the air, grounding him even as his thoughts scattered ahead. Behind him, the sound of hooves slowed. Doran was already speaking with a guard. Elia stretched her legs after the ride. Oberyn and Manfredi were bickering over who had led the tighter formation. Mors ignored the noise. He stared up at the castle. Home, he thought. But it didn't feel the same. It looked the same, stood just as tall, but somehow, it felt smaller. As if he had outgrown it while it stayed the same. They walked through the palace with barely a pause, stepping into the throne room just as Princess Lorza finished hearing a final petition. Nobles lined the gallery, most too caught up in court formalities to notice the new arrivals. But Lorza noticed. Her gaze swept over her children and lingered on Mors. She said nothing, only gave a single nod before motioning for the Castellan, Prince Maron, to close the session. They followed her through an arched corridor lined with Dornish tapestries and portraits of past princes of Dorne, eventually entering the solar where she held private council. Maron arrived soon after, his steps brisk and a small smile on his face, clearly pleased to see them all back. "About time," he said with a smile. His eyes found Manfredi first, who ran forward for a brief embrace, then settled on Mors. "And you, nephew? Still among the living, I see." Mors dipped his head, but the ghost of a grin touched his lips. "Mostly." Maron clapped a hand on his shoulder. "I heard what happened. We feared the worst. The gods must favor your blood. Or your stubbornness," Lorza added dryly as she moved past them to her chair. The room settled as they took their seats. Doran stood beside the table, folding his hands. "You weren't due to return until next month, so color me surprised when Maron informed me you'd be back early. Did something urgent bring you all home?" "Mother, I think we've had enough excitement to last us a while," Doran said. "After everything that's happened, we all agreed it was best to return home." Lorza gave a nod of understanding, though her eyes flicked briefly toward Mors. "Understandable. I'm glad to have you all back in one piece." Doran hesitated, casting a glance at Mors's expectant face. Then he sighed. "There is something else. A request. From Mors." Lorza raised a brow, the lines around her eyes tightening as she shifted her gaze between them. "Go on." "He wishes to begin formal training," Doran said evenly. "With the spears of the Sunday." "Oh." Oberyn grinned, leaning forward. "Why didn't you say so earlier, little brother? That's a grand idea. I'll be joining as well." Manfredi gave a small shrug, lifting his hand half-heartedly. "Me too." Lorza leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting from one face to the next, clearly surprised. "The spears? At your age?" "I'm nearly 11, Mors said, his tone steady. "And that's still a boy." "Mother," Doran interjected gently, "he may still be a boy, but his heart is set. He doesn't seek battle, only training and preparation. Oberyn and Manfredi would benefit from it as well." Lorza exhaled slowly, her fingers curling lightly against the armrest. "Doran, you are the most level-headed among us. Why are you supporting this?" "Oberyn, you're nearly 14. And Manfredi isn't far behind." "But Mors." Lorza's voice softened, her eyes narrowing with maternal scrutiny. "This ambition, does it come from you, or someone else?" Her gaze slid toward Oberyn, who suddenly found the floor very interesting. "It's mine," Mors said, without a blink. Lorza's brow lifted. "Why?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Because peace never lasts. Everything we have, everything we are, can vanish in a moment. All it takes is one mistake, or one enemy with the will to act. I'd rather be a weapon and shield ready to protect this family than a soft-handed prince waiting for others to protect him." Silence fell. Even Oberyn stopped smiling. Doran looked at Mors, surprised. Clearly, he hadn't expected such a response. Maron broke the silence first. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken, spoken like a true member of House Martell. "But I do agree with my sister, you're still a bit on the young side, Mors." Lorza nodded slightly at Maron, then turned back to Mors. "Training isn't ceremonial, child. The spears don't coddle, and neither will I. The sooner I can begin, the sooner I can be ready. I don't want to be coddled. I want to be useful." He paused, then added, "The basic training we currently have is insufficient for that." Doran nodded once. "He's been preparing already, hidden, I might add. I'd rather guide him properly than risk him overextending himself and getting hurt, or worse. He is a prince of Dorne, after all. Uncle Luin should assess him when he returns." "Luin is harsh," Lorza murmured. "So is the world he'll face," Doran replied. Another pause. Finally, Lorza leaned forward, lacing her fingers. 14. That's when Oberyn and Manfredi may officially join the spears properly. Until then, all three of you will train under Mehran's watch. Physical drills. Weapons forms. Conditioning. She turned to Maron. Will you accept that charge? Maron inclined his head. Gladly. I'll put them through the same paces that new recruits for the spears go through. Maybe harder. Let's see if that commitment still stands after a week. Good, Lorza said, then fixed Mors with her gaze again. And when your uncle Luwin returns, the final say will be his. If he finds you lacking, this conversation ends. No arguments. Understood, Mother, Mors said. Oberyn glanced at him, a cocky smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Looks like we'll be suffering together, brothers. Manfredi groaned. Sons help us all. Elia finally spoke, shaking her head with mock exasperation. You're all mad, but at least you'll be mad together. I'll be sure to keep a close watch from under the shade. Mors looked around the room at his mother, at his uncle, at his brothers, at his cousin, and let the moment settle over him. A small step forward, one that could build real momentum. At the very least, it was permission to push further and try harder. It was the beginning of something real, something that could grow into the influence he needed. And maybe, one day, he would have the influence and power to actually protect this family. As they filtered out of the solar, Doran clapped a hand on Mors's shoulder. You chose your path. Now walk it well. I believe in you. Mors nodded, his voice low. I will, and thank you, brother. Doran lingered a moment longer at the doorway. If you ever need to talk about anything, you can come to us. Don't keep things bottled up, all right? Mors met his eyes and gave a small nod. I promise. The hallway smelled of warm stone and sun-soaked linen. As they made their way to the great hall for a light meal, Oberyn laughed and started teasing Manfredi. Quick detour, Oberyn announced. Spotted a new maid I haven't met yet. Thought I'd be friendly. Will you be joining me again, Manfredi? Manfredi laughed awkwardly, shooting a guilty glance at Elia, hoping she hadn't heard, though he wasn't optimistic. Spare the poor girl, Elia muttered, rolling her eyes as she stepped ahead. At least until she's had a meal. Or a warning. Oberyn only grinned wider, unbothered as ever. Half the fun is seeing how they react. Besides, who can resist this wonderful prince? Mors lingered a step behind them all, walking in rhythm but not entirely among them. His hands stayed at his sides, relaxed but thoughtful. He let their banter float past him, soaking in the rhythm of family without needing to interrupt. His mind wasn't on food. Or Oberyn's distractions. It was on what had just occurred. The way Lorza's eyes had lingered. The way Mehran's voice had softened, even as it pushed. The way Doran had stood not just beside him, but behind him. That mattered. They're watching now, he thought. All of them. Not just what I say but how I move. How I endure. How I learn. That meant no missteps. No wasted effort. Every cut he took in training, every mistake, every bruise, they were going to remember it. Measure him by it. And judge him. He would give them no excuse to dismiss him again. As they neared the great hall, sunlight slanted through the high windows, painting warm golden shapes across the patterned floor. Mors slowed his pace slightly, letting the others move ahead. He wasn't hesitation. He was reflection. A seat at the table, he reminded himself. Not just to be present but to have a voice. To prevent the absolute shitstorm coming our way. For his family. For House Martell. Unbowed, unbent, unbroken, he quietly muttered. Man, those words are catchy. Chapter 6, Chapter V, Blood in the Sand. Sun's pair next day. The scream of twisting metal hit before the pain. Mors shot up in bed, drenched in sweat, his chest heaving. The room around him was dim stone walls, arched windows, the faint breeze of morning slipping through a cracked shutter. Sun's pair. Not asphalt. Not steel. Not the hum of an engine right before it all went dark. Just the silence of early light, and the soft sound of his breath slowing. The crash. He could still feel it sometimes. The G-force pulling sideways. The wheel turning too late. The hollow rush of adrenaline, then nothing. No pain, no panic, just stillness. Like the universe hit pause right after impact. His fingers curled against the blanket, grounding himself in the rough Dornish weave. In that other life, he'd chased everything: money, women, adrenaline, reputation. Weekends blurred into deals and drinks and waking up in strange apartments with someone else's perfume on his collar. He had ruled in boardrooms and bedrooms and hadn't cared what came next. And yet, it was never enough. He didn't regret the rush. He regretted how empty it all felt afterward. Every accomplishment, every escape, it was all noise covering a kind of hunger he never understood until it was too late. Now, he had time. A second chance. A family. This time, he wouldn't waste it. Mors rose slowly, pulling on his training tunic and boots. His muscles still ached from the long ride back to Sun's pair, but that was fine. He needed the ache. It reminded him that the body was his. That he was alive. That all of this was real. Outside, the courtyard was already glowing with morning light. The training yard was empty when he arrived, empty except for Maron, who stood near a rack of spears, arms crossed. "You're early," Maron said without turning. "I couldn't sleep," Mors replied, stepping onto the sand. Maron nodded once. "Good. Then you'll have time to bleed before the others get here." Mors gave a dry smile. "That sounds encouraging." "It should be. The spears aren't built on comfort. Trust me, I rode with them for 2 years." Maron tossed him a wooden practice spear. Mors caught it, tested the weight. Lighter than expected. Balanced. First drill. Footwork and follow through. "You don't stop until I say." The command came sharp. Mors moved. Thrust. Twist. Step. Reset. Again. 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 The sun climbed higher. Sweat clung to his skin, turned his tunic dark, stuck strands of silver hair to his face. Still, he moved. Maron said nothing, only watched, correcting with a grunt or a small shake of the head. When the others arrived, Oberyn first, then Manfredi, they found Mors already soaked and winded, but still going. Oberyn whistled. "Someone's trying to show us up." Mors didn't answer, just struck again. By mid-morning, they moved to partner drills. Maron paired Oberyn with Manfredi and stepped in to spar with Mors himself. "You hold back," Maron said as they circled. "You're faster than you show." Mors didn't respond. He focused. Watched the shift of Mayron's feet. The dip of his shoulder. The blow came in a flash too fast. Mors parried, barely. The shock ran through his arm. "He's not going easy on me." Another strike. Mors sidestepped, swept low, drove the blunt end toward Mayron's ribs. It was batted away with the ease of a man who had done this his whole life. Then pain bloomed in Mors's side as Maron spun, striking low and fast. Mors grunted and dropped to a knee. "You fight like your body hasn't caught up to your instincts," Maron said, voice calm. "Like you're wearing training armor a size too small and overcompensating for it. Stop forcing it. Let it grow naturally. Get up." Mors rose. He didn't speak. Again. They clashed. Wood struck wood, then skin. Mors got in a clean jab to the shoulder, but it wasn't enough. Maron broke through again, this time knocking the spear from Mors's hands entirely. The others had stopped to watch. Even Oberyn was quiet. Maron stepped back, tossed the spear to Mors again. You've got potential, boy. But you're still too green. We'll help you with that. He circled him slowly, then tapped his temple. Your body wants to react. But your head keeps getting in the way. Combat doesn't wait for you to think. Let it flow. Mors caught his breath, his ribs aching. He's right. But even as the pain throbbed, even as he picked up the spear again, he felt something else pushing beneath the hurt. It wasn't anger. Nor pride. Purpose. A week passed in a blur of drills, bruises, and exhaustion. By the end of it, Mors, Oberyn, and Manfred lay sprawled across the training yard, drenched in sweat, panting like half-drowned hounds. Blood freckled the sand from shallow cuts and split knuckles. Their limbs twitched from overstretched muscles, chests heaving in tandem, as if the yard itself had wrung them dry. Mauron stood over them, arms crossed, a rare glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Although none of you look like you can stand, he said dryly, I'm satisfied. You've made more progress in 1 week than some do in a month. All three groaned in unison. Manfred muttered something unintelligible into the sand. Oberyn rolled onto his side, clutching his ribs. If this is what progress feels like, I'll settle for mediocrity. Despite the protest, they forced themselves upright, groaning and gasping as they climbed to their feet. 2.5 more weeks passed. By the end of it, Mors could hold his own against Oberyn and had begun to outpace Manfred, who was starting to fall behind. The fight was fluid and fast, more dance than duel. Sand flew as feet shifted and bodies twisted, spears clashing in tight, measured fury. It had become a free-for-all. Manfred lunged, but Mors turned his momentum against him, sweeping low and sending him crashing onto his back. Manfred grunted and tapped out, chest heaving. I yield. Again. Without pause, Mors pivoted back to Oberyn. The tempo doubled. Their spar stretched on in a blur of jabs, counters, and parries, movements precise and intuitive. They moved like men far older than their years, blades of instinct rather than memory. Mauron watched from the edge of the yard, arms folded tight. Gods, the boy's growth is monstrous. The thought came unbidden, but he didn't dismiss it. Quicker, stronger, faster recovery every day. He barely rests between sessions now. Is this what happens when Martell blood mixes with the dragons? It wasn't just strength. It was adaptability. Focus. The way Mors read his opponents, how he anticipated movements before they finished forming. Mauron had trained with prodigies before. Oberyn was one. But Mors? Mors was something else. Then the sound came, hoofbeats, fast and urgent, pounding the sand outside Sunspear's gates. They all paused. Even Oberyn lowered his spear and turned toward the noise. Mauron narrowed his eyes, then nodded toward the gate. The spears, he said simply. They've returned. The boys looked at each other. The unspoken truth hung between them, it was time. Mauron stepped back and signaled the end of the session. That's enough. Clean yourselves up. You'll want to look like warriors when you meet Luwin. The three of them made their way toward the walls, already hearing the approach of riders through the lower court. As they neared the gate, the spears of the sun came into view. 100 mounted riders in formation, armor dark and sand-worn, weapons strapped but ready, banners trailing behind them like tongues of flame. Their faces were stone. Their movements precise. Every horse turned as one. They looked like men carved from the desert. 11 riders broke off and continued toward the gate while the remainder veered toward the stables in perfect sync. Mors slowed as he watched them ride in, the power and discipline unmistakable. The sheer presence of them. One day, if I want influence like Luwin or Mauron, I'll have to lead them. Not just be one of them. Command them. Earn their respect. And to do that, I'll have to be more than just promising. I'll have to be undeniable. As the dust settled and the spears dismounted, Luwin Martell appeared among them, taller than most in Dorne, a worn expression beneath his helm, his eyes already scanning the courtyard. Mors straightened his posture. The time for preparation was over. The real testing had begun. Chapter 7, Chapter 6, The Weight of Steel. The courtyard was quiet. No music, no children's laughter, no servants bustling with trays or garlands. Just the rhythmic beat of boots on sand-packed stone, and the low groan of wood as training racks swayed in the breeze. Sun's pair was waking slowly, but this part of the palace was already alert. Mors stood with his spear planted in the dirt beside him. Oberyn stood to his right, barefoot and smirking faintly. Manfredi to his left, chewing the inside of his lip like it might keep him from throwing up. And before them, tall and motionless, stood Sir Lewin Martell, Prince of Dorne, commander of the Spears of the Sun, and, by reputation alone, one of the most dangerous men south of the Red Mountains. "You're not boys today," Lewin said, arms crossed, voice like sand scraping steel. "You're meat. If you're lucky, you'll become weapons. If not, I'll know soon enough." He began to pace, each step measured and slow. "You want to join the Spears? Earn the sash and the seal? Then know this, I don't care what your names are. I don't care who your mother is or what blood you think gives you the right to stand here. The spear doesn't care either. Only the sun will watch you burn." Mors didn't flinch. Neither did Oberyn. Manfredi looked like he was reconsidering life choices. "Good," Lewin said. "Let's begin." They trained without pause. Footwork. Shoulder drills. Weighted runs. Then live contact sparring with dulled spears. No shields. No padding. Just pain. Mors paired with Oberyn first, and the clash of wood against wood echoed through the stone corridor like war drums. Oberyn grinned as they moved. "Don't hold back," he said. "I won't," Mors answered and didn't. Their rhythm was tight, a sharp back and forth that forced focus. Oberyn struck fast and played to flare, but Mors read his hips, his shoulders. He countered with timing, not speed. It kept him alive, barely. He still lost. But not by much. "Better," Oberyn muttered as they separated. "You're heavier on the left foot though." Mors nodded, winded. "Noted." Lewin barked at them to rotate. Mors now faced Manfredi, who lunged in too early and caught a tap to the ribs. "Ow, 7 sorry," Manfredi gasped, staggering back. "Don't apologize," Mors said through gritted teeth. "Just guard your center." They went again. And again. And again. By mid-morning, their tunics clung to their skin, their palms raw, their legs trembling. Mors felt the heat like a second opponent, pounding behind his eyes. But he refused to stop. "You asked for this," he reminded himself. "Now prove you deserve it." Finally, Lewin stepped into the ring. "Individual trials," he said. "We separate steel from sand now." He pointed. "Mors. In." Mors tightened his grip on the spear and stepped forward. Lewin stripped off his overcloak, picked up a spear from the rack, and entered opposite him. "Attack," Lewin said. "Now." No warning. No signal. Just a demand. Mors moved. He lunged, form clean and precise, but Lewin swept the strike aside with a brutal arc, pivoting behind him like a shadow. Mors spun, more by instinct than thought, his feet adjusting without conscious command, a flash of reactive training from another life. He brought his elbow up to deflect, not standard spear form, but effective, just not fast enough. Lewin's spear cracked against his shoulder, staggering him. "Good reaction," Lewin growled. "But you need to be faster. You move like you're still waiting for permission." He stepped back, eyes sharp. "This isn't a lesson, it's a test." They moved again. Strike. Parry. Counter. Twist. Lewin didn't dance. He cut angles like a butcher. Mors gave ground, not from fear but because the only way to survive was to adapt. Don't chase. Let him come to you. He waited, baited a high strike, then ducked and swept low, but Luin jumped the strike and jabbed him in the ribs. Pain blossomed sharp and immediate. Mors dropped to one knee, gasping. Get up, Luin said. He did. They reset. Again. This time, Mors didn't attack first. He waited. Let the world slow. Watched Luin's front foot shift, just slightly. And when the blow came he was already turning. Wood cracked wood. Then silence. Luin stepped back, lowering his weapon slightly. Better, he said. Again. 2 more rounds. By the third, Mors's arms burned and his vision blurred. His whole body felt like one large bruise stitched together by stubborn will. Then Luin swept his legs out, hard. Mors hit the ground, spine jarring, breath whooshing out. He blinked against the sky. And froze. There on the shaded balcony above the courtyard stood Princess Lorza Martell. She wasn't announced. She wasn't surrounded by attendants or guards. She just stood there. Watching. Her face was unreadable. Her expression held neither pride nor disappointment, only scrutiny. Mors pushed himself up, every muscle screaming. By the time he looked again, she was gone. Oberyn went next. Then Manfrey. Both gave their best. Both ended face down in the dirt, bruised and humbled. When they lined up again, Luin stood before them with his arms behind his back. You'll begin training tomorrow at dawn, he said. With the new recruits. You'll eat with them, bleed with them, and earn your place from the sand up. If I ever hear you demanding special treatment or speaking as princes, I'll throw your spears into the sea and send you back to your mothers. Luin studied him for a moment, expression unreadable. You've got sharp instincts. Faster than most your age. He gestured toward the space between them. But the way you move, it's like your body's still learning to keep up with your instincts. He stepped forward, voice level. You think in angles, pressure, timing, that's rare. But you're not there yet. Your mind's ahead of your muscles. A pause. Then bluntly. Instinct without discipline gets people killed. You hesitate, and that's what gets you hurt. Or worse. Then at Oberyn. You rely too much on flair. Style won't stop steel. Then Manfrey. You're soft. But there's steel under it. We'll find it. He turned away. Dismissed. That night, Mors skipped the celebratory feast arranged for the spear's return. He found himself instead beneath one of the old fig trees by the lower garden wall, chewing on salted duck and bread while his muscles throbbed like hammered metal. He stared into the branches above. His knuckles were split. His ribs bruised. His ego shredded. And yet he had never felt more alive. Footsteps crunched behind him. You're missing roast boar and honey wine, Elia's voice said gently. He didn't turn. I've had enough feasting. She came to sit beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. Mother was watching, she said softly. I know. She didn't stay long. But, she saw you fall. Mors smirked dryly. Then she saw what I am. And what I'm not. No, Elia said. She saw you get up. That shut him up. After a beat, she placed a fig in his hand. Regardless of what's driving you down this path, always remember who you are and who you're fighting for. He looked down at the fruit. Then back at Elia, eyes steady. I haven't, he said. Before sunrise, Mors was already moving. He didn't wait for the horns. He didn't wait for the others. He rose before the world and ran across the silent courtyards, into the narrow alleys of Sun's Pair, down to the stables and out to the empty dunes where only the wind watched him. His legs burned. His chest heaved. But he didn't stop. He trained. He drilled stances until his thighs trembled. Practiced sweeps until his shoulders locked. When the sun finally broke over the horizon, he stood at the top of the dunes, sand-caked and blood-speckled from splinters. Below, the palace began to stir. The spears of the sun would begin drills soon. And Mors would be waiting. He wasn't training for approval, he was preparing to lead. To shape his own path. To challenge fate itself. And just like that, 2 years passed. Chapter 8, Chapter 7, Forge and Heart. Mid-272 AC. The desert had become his crucible. Mors Martell ran barefoot across the dunes long before the sun-crested sun spears towers, breath rhythmic, muscles surging with every stride. Only a strip of cloth at his waist, his chest slick with sweat and sand, and his breath steady despite the incline. His feet no longer blistered, the sun-kissed skin had thickened, hardened with each dawn. The stronger I become, the more this power strengthens me in return. It was a truth he'd only begun to fully understand. The strange aura within him, his gift, his cheat, whatever it was, did not grant power from nothing. It amplified. Enhanced. Multiplied the foundation already there. So he'd spent the last 2 years building that foundation day by day under Uncle Lewin's discipline and Uncle Mayron's steady hand. After the morning dunes, he dove into the sea. 3 laps out past the reefs, where the guards hesitated to follow. The salt burned his eyes, but that was the point: resistance, unpredictability, breath control. The ocean fought him every stroke. And he welcomed the fight. By the time he returned, sand stuck to his skin like armor. Then came the forge. 2 hours each day with the blacksmiths, working the bellows, hammering heated iron into shape first with his right hand, then his left. They called him mad at first, but the results spoke louder: strength, endurance, precision. His palms were a roadmap of burns and calluses now. Even Oberyn and Manfredi started joining now and then. In the afternoons, grappling drills in the pit with Oberyn and the heavier recruits. He began integrating movements from the fighting style he remembered: low stances, joint control, disabling strikes foreign to Westerosi forms but brutally effective. No flair. No honor-bound technique. Just leverage, instinct, and threat elimination. He didn't name it. It simply was. A kind of combat memory baked into his bones. In the evenings, spear forms. Then sword drills. Then recovery, if you could call dunking in a freezing cistern recovery. Sometimes he practiced blindfolded mapping movement through pressure and breath, not sight. Stress drills. Sudden attack responses. Training his body to react before thought could catch up. He did it all again the next day. And the next. And the next. "You're going to kill yourself," Oberyn muttered as they collapsed beside the training pit, chests heaving, bruises blooming across their ribs and arms. Mors rolled onto his side, panting. "The point of this is to avoid exactly that." Manfredi groaned from the other end. "You know, it's hard to sell that idea when you look half dead every evening." He sat up, rubbing his shoulder, then flexed his arm with a wince. "Still. I'll admit, I've been feeling stronger. These weird drills of yours, they're doing something." Mors didn't answer. He just stared up at the burning sky, letting the ache in his muscles anchor him. He could feel it, his body responding, growing faster than it had any right to. His power accelerated progress. But it didn't replace effort. "Any idea when Dorne will return?" he asked after a moment. His mother, Dorne, and Uncle Lewin had travelled to King's Landing for the grand event, King Aerys' 10-year anniversary tourney. The capital had buzzed with fanfare and spectacle, but word of tension had followed. Mors remembered visiting the city when he was only 5. He had met King Aerys, Queen Rilla, and Prince Rhaegar. Aerys had been courteous enough, though even then, his eyes had seemed off. Like something inside was humming too loud. Mors had been too young to name it then, but looking back now, it read like a warning sign. The queen, by contrast, had been lovely, graceful, gentle, and warm in the way only certain women could be with children. It was strange to think they were actually his first cousins. Rhaegar, well, Rhaegar had been 5 years old. They'd played, supposedly. Mors remembered Flash's laughter, wooden swords, a courtyard fountain, but it all felt distant, like scenes from someone else's home video. What had made more recent news, however, was the sharp exchange between King Aerys and his hand, Lord Tywin Lannister. An offhand insult to Joanna Lannister had reportedly caused a stir so severe that Tywin attempted to resign. Aerys refused. Oberyn shrugged without opening his eyes, sprawled flat in the sand. "No idea," he said. "But it shouldn't be much longer. Mother's eager to start that courtship tour she keeps talking about." He sighed helplessly, tossing a pebble into the dirt beside him. And wasn't that a surprise? Apparently, his mother and Joanna Lannister had been quite close in their youth, close enough to discuss the possibility of betrothing the Lannister twins to Martell blood. Since Doran was too old for such matches, that left 3 likely candidates: Elia, Oberyn, and himself. Mors exhaled slowly, the idea settling on his chest like a weight. Elia, tied to Jaime. Oberyn, forced into a match with Cersei. Or worse, himself, shackled to a golden lioness with wildfire behind her eyes. He didn't know which pairing sounded more dangerous. Did this really happen in the story, Mors wondered? Or was this just another ripple, the butterfly effect, catching wind? They could only wait for Doran's return. When the summons came, Mors wasn't surprised. He paused only long enough to wipe the sweat from his brow before making his way to the High Solar. The family had gathered, but they weren't alone. And something in the air felt off. Tension. Standing near the window was a beautiful, cool-toned woman with dark eyes and long black hair, her features partially veiled in the formal style of Norvashi nobility. Beside her stood a tall, powerfully built man, his dark skin gleaming, head shaved clean, posture sharp and unmoving like a blade waiting to be drawn. Doran stood beside the woman, one hand gently resting on her arm, and for the first time in recent memory wore a rare, genuine smile. Elia sat straight-backed and silent, but her posture was rigid. Oberyn lounged like he didn't care, one leg crossed, but his eyes never left the guests. Manfredi hovered behind a chair, unsure if he should sit or just keep pretending not to fidget. Maron stood off to the side, holding a half-opened scroll, as unreadable as ever, but worry lingered in the furrow of his brow. Luwin was notably absent, still leading a regiment in pursuit of the sand bandits that had hit a caravan the week before. At the head of the room stood Princess Lorza, dressed in formal robes of burnt red and black, her face unreadable, her presence unmistakable. She raised a hand. "Sit." They obeyed. She hesitated for just a moment. Then spoke. "This is Melario, a noblewoman of Norvos." She paused, eyes narrowing slightly, measuring the room. Then continued. "She is Doran's betrothed. They are to be married." Silence cracked like glass. Elia blinked, lips parting, but no words came. Oberyn stood suddenly and let out a wild, disbelieving laugh. Manfredi dropped into the nearest chair with a thud. Maron didn't move, but his thumb slipped from the scroll just slightly. And Mors just stared. "Hey," he said, too stunned to find anything smarter. Elia stood abruptly, but not in anger. Her eyes were wide, a strange brightness behind them. "You truly love her?" she asked Doran, her voice softer now. Doran nodded without hesitation. "With all I am." Elia let out a slow breath, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Then I'm happy for you." She turned to Melario, her tone gentle. "Truly. Any maiden dreams of marrying for love, even if she pretends otherwise." Her gaze lingered on Doran. "You may be the first noble in a generation to actually do it." Melario inclined her head, respectful, a small smile touching her lips. "Then I thank you, Princess." Elia snorted lightly. You'll have to call me sister now. Come, we should talk. That earned the faintest smirk from Lorza, barely visible at the corners of her mouth. With that settled, the princess said, her voice regaining its edge, Melario is here as a future Martell. And we will honor that. Her eyes slid to Doran. Though your timing could not be worse. There's never a good time to break expectations, Melario replied, her Norvashi accent lacing her words. But I'll make sure to make him happy. Maron cleared his throat at last. Then. I take it the courtship tour is postponed. Lorza turned her head slowly. That's correct. There will be a wedding first. In 2 months. Send word to the lords of Dorne and beyond. A pause. And double the wine orders, we'll need it. Oberyn chuckled, leaning back. Ah, now that sounds like Sun's pair. We should host a small tourney while we're at it, something for our age. A get to know your betrothed sort of blood sport. Elia rose again, her expression bright. If you'll excuse us, Melario and I are going to tour the gardens. She took Melario's arm with ease, and the two women left the room together, their steps light and unhurried. Mors watched them go, eyes trailing the tall figure that followed behind. By the way, he muttered, who's tall, dark, and brooding? Lorza's smile returned, faint and knowing. He's a bearded priest of Norvos. His name is Ario Hota. Sent by Melario's family to protect her. Ah, Mors said. That made sense. Big. Silent. Axe-shaped presence. Definitely a bodyguard. This was definitely not what he'd expected when he was summoned. Almost at the same moment, he and Oberyn turned toward Doran with matching glints of mischief in their eyes. They looked at each other, grinned like twin conspirators, then stood. All right, brother, Oberyn said, cracking his knuckles. Time for details. All of them. Yes, Mors added. We need names, places, scandal, and a map of how exactly you pulled this off without telling any of us. Doran sighed. But he was still smiling. Chapter 9, Chapter 8, Sand and Scars. 2 months later. The sun above Sun's pair was merciless, but the garden courtyard was alive with color. Silk banners snapped in the sea wind. Spices scented the air. From balconies, nobles leaned in to watch the union of Prince Doran Martell and Melario of Norvos. It was the kind of ceremony Dorne rarely hosted, sincere, vibrant, and crowded with nearly every major house from the region. Princess Lorza Martell stood tall beside the couple. She didn't just offer a formal blessing, she offered protection. Let no lord whisper that this was a soft match. Let them whisper that Dorne chooses comfort not to escape duty, but to endure it. Mors stood quietly between Elia and Manfredi, taking it all in. He wasn't old enough to understand every political ripple, but he could see the tension on certain faces. Lord Edgar Euronwood's jaw stayed tight the whole ceremony. A missed match, no doubt. An insult, maybe. After the feast, during the courtyard mingling, Manfredi nudged Mors. 2 of the Euronwood knights were talking in the breezeway. One of them said, Dorne gave up strength for a bedfellow from across the sea. Mors glanced toward Lorza, who stood sipping wine near the fountain. Tell her or Doran. Mother, Mors said. Doran doesn't need the wait tonight. A few days later, just after sunrise, the royal caravan gathered at Sunspear's main gates. Princess Lorza rode at the front, her sand steed cloaked in deep crimson barding. Doran and Melario remained behind, Doran now acting as regent during his mother's absence. Luwin stayed as well, taking command of city defense and helping Melario adjust to court life. The Euronwood host had departed the morning after the wedding without so much as a proper farewell. Lord Edgar, along with his son Ormond and daughter Sorella, had been seen in what looked like a heated argument near the stables. Mors had wanted to ask, but it was Maron who filled in the blanks later. Apparently, House Euronwood had once pushed hard for a match between Doran and Sorella, and before that, had tried to secure Elia for Ormond. Lorza had ultimately allowed Doran to marry Melario, but now Mors understood why she had seemed conflicted leading up to the ceremony. As the gates closed behind them, Mors glanced back at Sun's pair. He'd never been farther than the Water Gardens. This wasn't just a journey, it felt like his first real step into the world beyond. They would cross all of Dorne by caravan before reaching Starfall, the ancestral seat of House Dane along the Torrentine River. After a day's stay, they would board a ship bound for the Reach, with Casterly Rock as the final destination in the Westerlands. Politics had never been his strong suit, not in his past life, and not now. But watching Lord Edgar storm off had made one thing clear: keeping House Dane, Dorne's third strongest house, close wasn't just smart, it was necessary. Maron rode just behind Lorza, leading the formation. Elia kept pace with Oberyn and Manfrey, their voices light with banter. Mors stayed nearby, quiet, watching more than speaking. This caravan didn't just carry supplies, it carried a message. A reminder to all of Dorne: we are House Martell. We are present. We are watching. They made several stops along the way to greet the people, brief ceremonies, food offerings, blessings. At one such stop, House Dane rejoined the royal party. Lord Beric Dane, tall, silver-bearded, and formal, greeted Lorza with quiet respect. His sons flanked him: Ulrich, calm and observant; Arthur, already known across Dorne for his sword work; and Ashura, who looked like she was measuring everyone around her. Mors and Oberyn had already befriended Arthur and Ulrich during sparring the previous day, but Mors had yet to meet Ashura. That changed quickly. She spotted him the moment she arrived and marched straight over, hands on hips. "You're the one everyone's been talking about," she said flatly. Mors blinked. "Didn't know I had fans." "You don't," she said. "I'm just trying to figure out if you're actually fast, or if everyone's confusing brooding for skill." Oberyn let out a laugh before stifling it behind a cough. Elia smirked. Manfredi looked like he wanted to back away before he got caught in the blast zone. Mors tilted his head. "Do you always open with a challenge?" Ashura didn't flinch. "Do you always dodge with sarcasm?" "Careful," Oberyn warned with a grin. "She's got a wooden sword and no restraint." Ashura shrugged. "Not no restraint. Just nothing to prove. I'm going to be a knight." Mors raised a brow. "You're what, 11? I'm 12. And from what I hear, so are you. Nobody's stopping you." "Girls can't be knights," Manfredi muttered, then immediately ducked as Elia raised her hand. Ashura smirked and shot a look toward Lorza. "This is Dorne. Women can rule. If I want to be a knight, I will be. And father will just have to allow it." Arthur stepped up then, voice calm but firm. "Ashura, go spar with the guards." She rolled her eyes, but before leaving, she pointed at Mors. "I'll test you later." He watched her go. "Is she always like that?" Arthur nodded. "Yes. And she usually wins." Then Arthur turned to Mors. "Yesterday's spar, your timing's good. You've got more talent than you realize. Especially with a long sword." Mors blinked. "I've trained mostly with short swords or spears." "Then let's fix that. It never hurts to master more than one weapon." Arthur offered a small, sincere nod. "I'll train you, if you're willing." Mors grinned. "If you're offering, who am I to turn down a lesson from the future sword of the morning?" Arthur looked away, almost embarrassed. Ulrich chuckled and clapped his younger brother on the shoulder. "That title still has to be earned," Arthur said quietly. "But thank you." Oberyn stepped in next, grinning. "Trying to get ahead with extra training, Mors? Not without me. I'll join too. I can't let the two of you run circles around me." Arthur shrugged. "The more, the better." Manfredi lifted a hand. Can I watch? Oberyn shot him a wink. Only if you bring the water. The caravan moved through the heart of Dorne. Towns turned out in celebration, offering fruit, music, and bread. Lorza spoke with fire and clarity. Elia charmed the crowd. Oberyn danced with local girls and challenged retainers to impromptu duels. And Mors watched it all. He trained with Arthur in the evenings. The sparring was intense, efficient, almost silent. Arthur didn't speak often, but when he did, it mattered. You don't waste movement, Arthur said one night after a bout. I hate wasting anything, Mors replied, breathless. Arthur handed him water. Good. That's what makes a real fighter. 3 days later, the caravan entered the Red Mountains. The path narrowed into a rocky pass bordered by jagged cliffs. That's when the attack came. Shouts. Steel on steel. Sudden movement. Mountain raiders poured from the rocks, blades flashing. The guards scrambled to form ranks. Mors didn't wait. He kicked off the side of a supply wagon, vaulted onto a low ledge, and sprinted across it at full speed. He launched into the air, tucked mid-jump, and landed behind a raider charging a dismounted guard. One strike to the back of the knee. Another to the ribs. Then a quick thrust of his short sword through the throat. The man crumpled. Another bandit turned. Mors was already moving. He sprinted, jumped, and wall-kicked off a nearby boulder to gain height. In midair, he twisted and drove the blunt end of his spear into the man's shoulder. The raider cried out and dropped his weapon only for Mors to send a dagger straight into his chest a moment later. Across the trail, Oberyn was already in motion, dancing between 2 raiders with his spear flashing. Left side, he called. Archer in the rocks. Mors nodded and ran. He scaled a sloped outcrop without slowing, hands finding holds by instinct. He reached the top, vaulted the ridge and crashed straight into the archer. The bow flew from the man's grip. Mors punched once, twice, then drove a dagger in to finish it. As he turned, another attacker lunged from the side. Mors pivoted sharply, ducked under the swing, and then something blurred past his vision. Arthur Dayne. One clean cut. The raider collapsed. Arthur looked over. Well done, he said. Down below, Maron moved like a ghost through the chaos. 2 enemies dropped before they even realized he was there. Within minutes, it was over. The surviving raiders broke and fled into the hills. Lorza rode in, her cloak snapping behind her in the wind. She surveyed the aftermath, then turned to Mors. Her expression remained composed, but her eyes lingered on him with a hint of concern. You were sharp, she said. But let's keep the heroics to a minimum until you're older. She glanced up at the ridgeline, thoughtful. We'll need to task the spears with clearing these mountains. This won't be the last ambush. Mors nodded absent-mindedly, but his attention was on wiping blood from his hands and blades. Funny. No one ever mentions how hard it is to clean someone else's blood. They cleaned the area in silence, moving methodically, then set up camp nearby as dusk settled in. Chapter 10, Chapter 9, Embers and Echoes. That night, the fire crackled low. Mors sat in silence, staring into the flames, his thoughts running quiet and heavy. I killed 3 people today. And I feel nothing. Is that normal? Has this world changed me that much already? He didn't notice Ashura until she dropped down across from him, sitting cross-legged and poking dates onto a small stick to roast. You didn't hesitate up there, she said, watching him. Mors flinched slightly, then relaxed when he saw it was her. Didn't have time to, he muttered. Most people freeze. You didn't. You climbed like it was nothing. He shrugged. We train for that. Spears cadets learn to fight in rough terrain. Ashura handed him a roasted date. I want a rematch. Mors tilted his head. We haven't fought yet. Exactly. I want a rematch after our first fight. Just in case you win. He chuckled. Not very confident, are you? She smirked. Just covering all exits. Like the guards would say. Oberyn walked over, catching the tail end of the conversation. You two are going to get along too well. I can already feel it. He said it with a grin, though his eyes lingered on Mors with quiet concern. Manfredi followed, handing out water skins. No broken bones. Just bruises, Mors said. And maybe my pride. Arthur arrived a few moments later, settling on a flat stone and pulling out a whetstone for his blade. He didn't say much, but when he spoke, it always carried weight. Prince Mors. You handled yourself well. Tomorrow we train again. Mors nodded. I'll be ready. Arthur gave a small, rare smile. You're already ahead of most. Just don't stop there. As the fire popped and settled into quiet embers, Mors looked around at the group. Oberyn leaning back with a smirk, Manfredi nudging Ashura with some joke, Arthur sharpening his sword. The dark thoughts faded, at least for now. For the first time in a while, he didn't feel like a shadow trailing the edge. He felt like he belonged. They say this tour is for Dorne to see us, he thought. But maybe it's showing me something too. Who I'm becoming. A few days later, they arrived at Starfall, where they stayed for 3 days attending feasts, walking the cliff gardens, and meeting the rest of House Dane. Lorza seemed to view the Danes with a strategist's eye now. Maron discussed tariffs and trade routes with Lord Beric, while Oberyn made it his mission to charm every Dane retainer with poetry, acrobatics, and tales of manhood earned too early. Arthur intensified Mors's training after the battle in the cliffs. Ashura and Mors finally had their duel, but Ashura kicked him in the shin and declared victory on the spot. Oberyn called it a draw. On account of underhanded ingenuity. On the 4th morning, the Martells descended to the river port, where sleek vessels bound for the arbor waited. As they boarded, Ashura followed Mors down to the dock. Next time I'll beat you properly, she said. I look forward to it, he replied. Arthur nodded from behind her. Travel safe. You too, Mors said. And thank you for your welcome, and your guidance. He glanced back at Starfall as the sails unfurled. Ashura Dane. Spoiled, loud, unruly and somehow, fun. Around her, I actually felt my age. Maybe I do need more friends. The ship caught the wind, and the pale towers of Starfall disappeared behind them. Ahead lay the arbor, a new realm of courtiers, contracts, and quiet threats. Behind him, Mors had made new friends. Even that night wannabe. Even if she did kick like a mule. Gods help whoever marries her. Princess Lorza called the group closer, her voice clear as ever. Understand this, the rest of the realm does not see us as equals. They do not admire our traditions or our independence. They call us strange, say we smell of spice and sweat. That we look off. That we do not kneel when we should. And so, we are not their first choice for marriage. Or alliance. Or trust. Mors kept his eyes on her, feeling the weight in every word. They do not love Dorne. But they want what we can offer: protection, bloodlines, trade. And for once, we must be clever enough to take advantage of that. She began pacing, the folds of her robe trailing like a shadow. For centuries, Dorne has been proud and isolated. But pride without strategy is vanity. And isolation is not safety, it is weakness waiting to be exploited. Her eyes swept across them. Our closest potential allies, the Reach, the Westerlands, and even the Stormlands, have wealth, influence, and armies. Even with our bloodied history, they offer more than the distant courts of Essos or the empty promises of the crown. We've fought the Reach and the Stormlands for generations, Oberyn muttered. And yet, marriage has quieted wars before, Lorza said coolly. When I speak of the Reach, I don't mean just the Tyrells. The Arbor has a strong fleet and vast trade power. Old Town, for all its quiet, holds hidden strength. I wouldn't be surprised if they could rival the Tyrells in supremacy if they wanted to. But they don't. And that makes them even more dangerous to underestimate. She looked toward the sea. Before we reach the Westerlands, we'll see if any true alliances can be found in the Reach. The arbor was green in a way Dorne never could be. Vine-wrapped towers rose from the cliffs like living monuments. The harbor swarmed with merchant ships, their sails stitched with gold thread and grapevine crests. The air smelled of citrus, crushed oak leaves, and wine older than most nights. It was beautiful, the kind of beauty that made Mors uneasy. Like a table set for someone else to decide where you sit. The Martells drew attention the moment they stepped ashore. Princess Lorza led with a crimson robe draped like command. Maron followed calm, silent, and impossible to ignore. Elia gave the expected smiles. Oberyn gave the inappropriate ones. Manfredi trailed behind, trying not to trip over his own boots. But the one they stared at most was Mors. He didn't look like his siblings. Sun-kissed, yes, but with skin a shade lighter. Hair pale as Dornish moonlight. Eyes Valyrian violet. People squinted, trying to place him. Trying to decide if he was Dornish, or something else entirely. They don't know what to make of me, he thought. Good. Let them keep guessing. The red wines hosted like men trying to drink away the memory of rebellion before it could begin. Long tables groaned with cheese, candied lemon, and enough arbor gold to bathe in. But the pleasantries rang hollow beneath the polished silver. Your line carries the elegance of the East, one lordling told Elia. You shine like Aegon's dawn, another said to Mors. The smile Mors gave didn't reach his eyes. His cheeks were already tired from too many forced courtesies. They'd marry a wine barrel if it had Valyrian eyes, he thought. Despite how exhausting the whole farce was, they left with several trade agreements. Shipments of arbor gold were expected to arrive in Sun's Pair within the month. The sun hung low as the Martell ship pulled into Old Town. Banners flared in the harbor wind as they approached the towering high tower. Waiting at the gates, resplendent in polished armor and a green cloak stitched with silver flames, stood Sir Baelor Hightower, heir to Old Town. He greeted them with solemn grace. Princess Lorza, Prince Maron, honored kin of Dorne, welcome to Old Town. The high tower stands ready to serve. He bowed with perfect precision, then stepped forward to take Elia's hand. My lady Elia, he said, his tone softening, I hope you'll find our halls as beautiful as you are. Elia flushed slightly, offering him a graceful nod. You honor me, Sir Baelor. Oberyn made a face but said nothing. As Baelor turned to guide them through the great archway, he gestured with a sweeping arm and said, If you'll follow me, I shall. Pfft! A strained, trumpet-like sound escaped sharp and sudden. The sound cut clean through the corridor. A short, unmistakable burst of air. Silence. Baelor froze. Everyone else did too. Oberyn choked on a breath. His lips twitched. He leaned toward Mors and Manfredi and muttered, barely audible, Baelor break wind. But Elia heard it too. Her shoulders stiffened, her mouth twitched. She bit the inside of her cheek so hard it nearly bled. Mors stared ahead like a statue, his chest straining with silent laughter. Baelor, either unaware or too proud to acknowledge it, continued walking head high, voice a little higher than before. Whatever flutter of affection had sparked between him and Elia vanished on the spot. Try as she might, every time she looked at him after that, all she could hear was Oberyn's voice and that terrible nickname echoing in her mind. And from that day on, to House Martell, Baelor Hightower would forever be known as Baelor Breakwind. Chapter 11, Chapter X, The Sun and Shadow. The feast at the Hightower was as polished as the marble underfoot, warm light from crystal chandeliers, long tables spread with roast duck, lemon-glazed fish, and greens soaked in arbor oils. Wine flowed freely. Courtiers whispered between courses. Musicians played soft harp melodies while the sea wind stirred banners bearing the burning tower of House Hightower. Lord Leighton Hightower made his entrance with quiet grandeur. He looked every bit the ancient pillar of Old Town, regal, unreadable, and slightly faded by time. He greeted Princess Lorza with a bow deeper than expected, then extended a hand to Prince Maron. It has been too long since Old Town hosted royalty from Dorne. You honor us. Maron bowed slightly. And we come with the hope of knowing the Reach anew. Seated beside Leighton were his children. Sir Baelor Hightower, his eldest, was the image of noble poise, tall, chiseled, and awkwardly persistent. His sister Aelry, demure and attentive. Garth, the youngest present, offered little more than a polite nod. Then there was Malara, already watching Mors before he even sat down. Baelor tried, once again, to charm Elia. He offered compliments, poured her wine, and even stood behind her chair slightly too long after a toast. Elia remained gracious but distant. Her glances toward Mors and Oberyn were brief but enough to show she was leaning on familiar ground for stability. Halfway through the meal, the music softened. Then Malara stood. She wore robes in strange overlapping greens, embroidered with spirals and symbols only she seemed to understand. Her expression was distant but focused. She walked slowly to the front of the hall. All conversation fell silent. She stopped a few paces from Mors and pointed. "I see you," she said, her voice calm yet unervingly clear. "The boy who is not just a boy. The pale flame beneath the dark Sunday." The room stiffened. Guests glanced at one another, unsure whether to be alarmed or entertained. "You are the Son of Dorne," Malara continued, raising a hand now. "You will light the path ahead. You will scorch the cold that seeks to swallow us. Your aura burns too brightly to be contained, it strengthens others simply by existing." Mors froze mid-motion. Utensils clinked. Someone coughed. A few lords exchanged wary, puzzled glances. "I offer myself to your cause," Malara said. "I will follow you. Serve you. Give whatever is needed. And if it must be, I will be your bride." Mors managed a polite smile, though a cold bead of sweat slid down the back of his neck. Too close, far too close. He didn't need to look to know Oberyn was watching. "Well," Oberyn muttered. That escalated. Malara returned to her seat without waiting for a response, completely unfazed. At the high table, Aelry Hightower poised, quiet, and far more grounded than her sister, blushed and looked down. She said nothing for the rest of the evening, but Mors caught her glancing at him 3 more times before dessert. Elia leaned in, her lips barely moving, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Quite the aura you're giving off. Might want to dial the flame down a notch." Mors sighed. "Please don't start. I'm already bracing for Oberyn, I don't need you joining in." Elia chuckled but said no more. Elia chuckled softly but let it go, her smile lingering as she turned back to her cup. Later that evening, Lorza's chambers were secured. Guards swept the room and shut the doors. No attendants. No retainers. Only family. Lorza stood at the center, Maron to her right. Seated on cushions around the room were Oberyn, Elia, Mors, and Manfredi. "We've traveled half the Reach," she began, "and now you've seen with your own eyes what they value, what they fear. I want to hear your thoughts. Speak freely." Oberyn raised a hand with a smirk. "I think Baelor's still trying to fart out his dignity." Manfredi laughed. Elia elbowed Oberyn hard. Elia took the lead, her tone measured. "Old Town carries itself with pride. They act modest, but they're judging everything. Especially us." Lorza nodded. "And? They don't like how different we are. But they're curious." Mors sat straighter. "Old Town isn't flashy, but they're dangerous. They hold more power than they show. The faith. The citadel. The fleets. Even without armies, they influence the flow of ideas. They wait. They study. And if they strike, it's planned years in advance, Lorza's eyes sharpened. Good. Manfredi cleared his throat. They're watching how we act. I think they're testing if we're worth trusting. Maron turned to his son, surprised but nodded with quiet approval. Lorza walked slowly behind them. You're learning. All of you. Good. She stopped, then looked at Elia. You've had no fewer than 10 marriage offers since we left Sun's pair. Elia blinked. 10. Oberyn scoffed. And I've had what? 2? Tragic. Lorza raised a brow. You've had 2. Manfredi's had 2 as well. Manfredi nearly dropped the cup in his hand. And Mors. She continued. Everyone turned to look. More than any of you. Nearly 20 offers, formal and informal. And most aren't asking for a child to wed. They're trying to claim a future. Mors said nothing. But the weight of it pressed quietly in his chest. Lorza finished, we must not mistake attention for opportunity. Or opportunity for trust. She looked at each of them, one by one. Tomorrow, we leave Old Town. The Westerlands come next. Stay sharp. You're not just symbols anymore. You're weapons. Tools. And in time, rulers. Oberyn leaned back, wearing a sly grin. By the way, are we counting Malara Hightowers, offering as a marriage proposal? Mors let out a quiet groan, running a hand over his face. There was humor in it but also a flicker of unease. The others chuckled, some nervously. Lorza exhaled and glanced at Maron, brow creasing. Maron spoke calmly. She's called the Mad Maid for a reason. Brilliant, perhaps, but clearly not all there. It's not something worth pursuing. Lorza nodded, then added, Aelri, on the other hand, seemed particularly taken with Mors. But she's already promised to Lord Mace Tyrell. Best not to speak of it. No need to stir rumors where none are helpful. Maron smirked. All right then, Son of Dorne and the rest of you, get some sleep. We stop at the Shield Islands next before heading to Casterly Rock. Mors groaned quietly. The others burst out laughing. The next morning, sails filled with a steady wind as the Martell party departed Old Town. Farewells were given with practiced formality. Lord Leighton offered vague blessings, Baelor tried one last time to kiss Elia's hand and she politely turned to fix her hair instead. Malara simply stared at Mors from the balcony without blinking. Mors didn't wave back. They boarded 2 sleek ships provided by House Hightower, with guards and retainers stowing supplies below deck. The journey to the Shield Islands took less than a day with the sea calm and skies bright. By evening, green shores came into view. Oakenshield, the largest of the 4 isles and home to House Grimm. Stone walls rose from a cliffside fortress overlooking the harbour. Ships bearing golden oaks and silver anchors rocked gently in the port. As the Martell party disembarked, they were met at the docks by a line of armoured retainers and a tall, broad-shouldered man in his later 50s, salt grey hair, sun-worn skin, and a naval captain's bearing. His surcoat bore a golden oak on storm blue. He stepped forward with a respectful nod, but his face was unusually sombre. Princess Lorza. I am Lord Addison Grimm, Lord of Oakenshield and Warden of the Western Waters. Welcome to my island. Lorza disembarked first, Maron beside her. Mors followed with Elia, Oberyn, and Manfredi close behind. Lord Grimm, Lorza greeted, noting the stiffness in his shoulders. We thank you for receiving us on such short notice. Lord Addison bowed his head but didn't return the courtesy smile. There's news, he said. From Casterly Rock. Mayron's eyes narrowed. What kind of news? Addison looked directly at Lorza. Lady Joanna Lannister has died. In childbirth. The words struck like a cold wave. Even Oberyn's usual smirk vanished. The child? Lorza asked, steady but cold. A boy. He lived. But... Lord Grimm hesitated, his voice dropping lower. They say he was born twisted, deformed. Some whisper it's the god's punishment for Lord Tywin's pride. A sharp silence followed. Elia blinked, stunned. Manfredi stared at the ground. Mors glanced at his siblings, watching their faces. Lorza took a slow breath, then nodded once. "Thank you. We will rest tonight and sail out at dawn." Lord Grim gave another bow and gestured toward the keep behind him. "Rooms have been prepared. But you may want to keep a tighter guard near the servants. Rumors spread quickly here and not all of them are kind." That night, the Martells sat in hushed conversation in one of the guest halls. No feast. No laughter. Just the crackle of the hearth and the weight of bad news hanging over them. Oberyn broke the silence first, his voice low. The proudest man in Westeros just lost his wife, and gained a son he might wish hadn't survived. Lorza didn't look up from the fire. "He'll never show it in public. But in private, this will shake Casterly Rock." Mors watched her carefully. For once, she looked tired. "Mother," he asked, "how are you holding up?" She exhaled, slowly. "What can I say? I thought I'd be reunited with a friend to celebrate a birth, maybe even finalize a betrothal between our children." She paused. "Instead, I'll be arriving for a funeral." Mors didn't know what to feel. Grief, maybe. Pity. A strange, distant anger. He only knew one thing. This changed everything. Chapter 12, Chapter 11, The Lion's Pride. The cliffs of Lannisport loomed ahead like jagged gold, catching the late afternoon sun in shimmering defiance. The Martell banners flapped softly aboard the deck, the winds gentler now as if even the sea was hesitant to draw too close to Casterly Rock. Mors stood at the bow, eyes fixed on the harbour city unfurling before them. Compared to the arid beauty of Dorne or the windswept grace of the Reach, Lannisport looked carved out of wealth and polished stone. Ships packed tight in orderly rows, docks swarmed with banners of crimson and gold. Even the warehouses gleamed. "They polish their walls the way we polish steel," Oberyn murmured beside him. "And yet, something still stinks," Manfredi added, nose wrinkling. Mors said nothing. But he silently agreed with Manfredi. A host waited at the docks. At its head stood Sir Kevan Lannister, resplendent in polished armour that seemed to gleam without flaw. His face was grim, though he bowed in proper deference as Lorza disembarked. "Princess Lorza. On behalf of House Lannister, I welcome you to Lannisport," he said. "Though I wish it were under brighter stars." Lorza's expression was somber but composed, her eyes steady with quiet understanding. "You are kind to receive us." Kevan gestured toward the waiting carriages. "Lord Tywin sends his regrets. He is indisposed, but will receive you soon. Perhaps tomorrow, depending on how he fares." Oberyn arched a brow, but said nothing. As they boarded the carriages, Mors felt at the eyes. Dozens of them. From behind merchant stalls and beside guard towers. Lannisport's people were watching them not with curiosity, but judgment. Some even held disgust. As if the presence of Dorne itself was an offense. "They're staring," Elia muttered beside him. "And not kindly." "They look at us like we're stained," Manfredi said. "Not all of us," Oberyn noted. "Look at the ones near the steps, they're gawking at Mors." Indeed, several onlookers seemed caught between intrigue and confusion as they lingered on Mors's pale hair, the subtle glint of violet in his eyes. The unease turned to uncertainty, some almost bowed. "They think I'm Targaryen," Mors realized. "Or close enough." It didn't matter. They had grown used to it over the course of this tour. The Dornish were always viewed differently, watched with curiosity, judged with suspicion. But all of that faded the moment they saw it. Casterly Rock. Not just a castle but a mountain sculpted into a fortress. Towers rose from its golden sides like spears cast in the sun. The sheer size of it defied belief, its gates alone larger than most Dornish keeps. Kevin rode beside the lead carriage and spoke without flourish. Casterly Rock has never been taken by force. It never will be. Mors kept his expression neutral, but a thought surfaced. That's what the Casterlys said, before long the clever tricked them out of it. Once inside the gates, the Martell party was led through winding stone halls that echoed with wealth. Gold inlaid sconces. Tapestries stitched with pride. Even the servants moved like they knew they belonged to greatness. The feast was small. Intimate, even. But nothing about it felt welcoming. Kevin sat at the center of the table, his wife Dorna Swift beside him, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes and pleasant manner. She did most of the talking, gently inquiring about Sun's pair, the Reach, even the Arbor. The surprise came when the twins joined. Cersei and Jaime, golden-haired and barely 6, walked in under the watchful eye of a Septa. Cersei wore a red velvet gown, expression set in practiced confidence. Jaime trailed behind, fidgeting with a wooden lion toy. The moment Cersei saw Mors, she stopped. Her eyes widened just slightly and she tilted her head as if she couldn't decide whether he was a prince or a statue. "You're very pretty," she said. Oberyn nearly choked on his wine. Jaime scowled. "He's not." "What would you know?" Cersei shot back. "Besides, I didn't say he was a girl." Elia leaned in, whispering to Mors with a smirk, "Careful. You might have just won a Lannister heart." "Thank you, young lady," Mors said, a slight twitch at the corner of his eye and a polite, strained smile. "But handsome is the word we usually use for boys." It would have been amusing, if not for what came next. Cersei tilted her head again and asked, far too casually, "Is it true that Dornish people used to steal babies? Kill them sometimes?" The entire table went still. Kevin's fork paused mid-cut. Dorna Swift paled. Lors's expression remained unchanged, but her gaze sharpened, quietly taking in more than before. Marron cleared his throat. Many centuries ago, one rebellious house in the Red Mountains committed atrocities during the Narration unification. It was stamped out. Cersei didn't flinch. "Can I hire them? I want them to kill my baby brother." Jaime gasped. "Cersei! I hate him," she hissed. "He's a monster. He killed Mother. Why does no one else see that?" Elia rose from her seat slowly. "Cersei," she said gently. "You've just lost someone you love. That kind of pain, it doesn't always make sense. But no one is to blame." "He is," Cersei said, eyes shining. "You didn't see him. He's wrong." She turned and ran, red skirts swishing, Jaime scrambling to follow her, voice breaking as he called her name. For a moment, no one moved. Kevin pressed his hand to his brow. "Forgive us. She doesn't understand what she's saying." Lorza finally spoke, her voice low and certain. "She may not understand the weight of her words, but she meant every one of them." The rest of the evening passed under that shadow. Even Oberyn kept quiet. 2 days passed before Tywin emerged. The meeting was held behind closed doors, though it didn't stay private for long. Mors watched his mother and uncle return to the guest hall afterward, faces drawn taut. Marron didn't speak. He only poured a goblet of wine, drained half, and stared at the fire. Lorza stood with rigid posture, voice cold and final. "There will be no agreements with the Westerlands." Elia blinked. "Nothing at all. No alliances. No betrothals. No promises." Lorza's voice dropped, quiet but cutting. "He wanted our blood and our name without offering a damn thing in return, not even respect. He went so far as to call his newborn a perfect match for you." She let out a long breath, her posture softening as years seemed to settle on her shoulders. "With Joanna gone, his heart has hardened beyond reason. I fear he'll never be the man he once was." "And what of Lady Joanna's promises?" Mors asked. "Not a word," Marron muttered. He spoke of legacy, of duty, how Casterly Rock doesn't bow to sentiment. Lors's lips thinned. I would have left that hour. But Joanna deserved our respect. She was a good friend, once. The next day, the September of Casterly Rock was visited by many highborn mourners. Gold-threaded banners hung limp. Silent sisters guided the body of Joanna Lannister down the central aisle with slow, practiced steps. Tywin Lannister never left her side. He didn't weep. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, a stone carved in the shape of a man, unmoving, unflinching. Cersei clung to the bier, screaming for her mother. Jaime held her tightly, tears rolling down his cheeks, trying to soothe her even as his own voice broke. Mors watched in silence, hands clasped before him. For all his frustration with the Lannisters, he could feel it grief like a weight in the air. Even Tywin, for all his steel, looked broken in a way that words couldn't reach. This is what pride becomes, when there's no one left to soften it, Mors thought. No one from the Rock said a word to the Martells that morning. By nightfall, the Martell party was already back at the docks, escorted by Kevan Lannister and a contingent of guards. The same watchers stared from rooftops and alleys, but now they kept their distance. Pleasantries were exchanged, though it was clear everyone simply wanted the moment to pass. "Thank you," Lorza said, her voice composed. "You and your wife have shown us great courtesy, especially under such difficult circumstances." Kevan offered a tired nod. "It's what's proper. And what must be done." He paused, then added, "Stay near the mainland on your return. The Ironborn have grown bolder of late." "We will." "Thank you," Lorza replied. The sails were unfurled. The ship creaked and shifted with the tide. Mors stood beside his siblings at the rail, eyes on the cliffs. Oberyn exhaled. "So much for Westerland alliances." "Good riddance," Elia muttered, arms folded. "Do you think she meant it?" Manfredi asked softly. "Cersei?" Mors asked. "I think she meant every word. But I also think she's just a child. A broken one." Oberyn nodded. Like many children raised too close to power. As the ship pushed out into open waters, Casterly Rock faded behind them, less a fortress now, and more a wound they were eager to leave behind. The sea wind caught their cloaks. The Martells turned south once more, yearning for the stillness of the water gardens after a journey heavy with politics and grief. Chapter 13, Chapter 12, The Ghost and the Air. Early 273 AC. The gates of Sunspear loomed like a mirage made real, golden against the midday sun. After nearly half a year on the road and sea, the Martell entourage rode wearily into the palace courtyard, their banners hanging limp, their cloaks dusty and sweat-soaked. What should have felt like triumph tasted instead like sand. Mors remained quiet atop his saddle, eyes tracing the familiar outlines of Sunspear's towers and arches. The wind carried the scent of sun-warmed stone and salt home. But something in him had changed. He wasn't returning as the boy who had left. When they departed, he had stood just under 5 feet 5 inches, 165 centimeters, now, at 13, he measured a solid 5 feet 8 inches, 173 centimeters, only inches shy of the 5 feet 10 inches, 178 centimeters, he'd reached in his past life. But the difference wasn't just physical. He moved differently. Stood differently. Thought differently. The journey had stripped away any illusion that this world resembled the one he came from. Whatever maturity he once believed he had, it hadn't been enough. Not for this. And he would never be the same because of it. He'd also come to realize something else, something unsettling. He was more important than he'd initially understood. His bloodline, his appearance, the way strangers stared, he was too desirable for this realm. Politically. Symbolically. Visibly. Outside the walls of Sunspear, where he'd been shielded, insulated by family and familiarity, that truth had become undeniable. People didn't see a boy. They saw opportunity. leverage. A name that could shift alliances. A face that whispered fire and conquest. And that realization worried him, scared him, even. He already had enough to carry. Enough to prepare for. He couldn't do this alone. Servants rushed forward, bowing low, offering cool water and citrus-scented towels. Lorza dismounted first, stretching her spine with a wind-ce. Dornish was waiting near the western arch, hands clasped behind his back, robes crisp and posture impeccable. "Welcome home," he said simply. Lorza offered him a tired but genuine smile. "We're grateful for it." Elia and Oberyn greeted him warmly. Manfredi gave a quiet nod. Mors stepped forward last. Doran's gaze rested on him for a breath longer than was proper. "You've grown," Doran said. Mors inclined his head. "And you've kept the sand from swallowing Sun's pair." That drew a faint smirk from the prince. "Yes," Doran replied. "Had to throw away a couple of brooms to achieve it." Then, leaning toward Lorza, he murmured something low, inaudible to the rest. Her brows lifted slightly, then settled. She glanced at Mors just for a moment before schooling her expression. "Come," she said. "A light meal is waiting. Then rest. Doran, Maron, and I have something urgent to tend to. We won't be long." No one argued. They were too tired. But Mors noticed the looks. The southern solar offered welcome relief from the heat. Cool tiles kissed bare feet, and sea breezes curled lazily through the open arches. A long table awaited them, set with platters of lemon-spiced lamb, honeyed olives, baked figs, and chilled wine. The younger Martells ate in near silence until Oberyn broke it with a sigh. "I can't wait to spend a month at the Water Gardens," he said, already sounding half-drunk on the idea. "I hear we have some new servants." "Manfredi, you'll be joining me, right?" Manfredi gave a nervous smile, glancing toward Elia before answering. "I'll accompany you, to make sure things don't get out of hand." Elia rolled her eyes but chose not to comment. Oberyn smirked, then turned his attention to Mors. He gave him a once-over, humming theatrically. "You're 13, but you look much older now. I think it's time I gave you some other kinds of training, Mors. What do you say?" He smiled like a cat who'd just invented mischief itself. Elia stiffened instantly, rising from her seat like a desert scorpion ready to strike. "You will do no such thing, Oberyn. Mors is not like you. And just because he looks older doesn't mean he isn't still 13. Oberyn raised his hands in mock surrender. "Peace, sister. It was a joke. I would never corrupt our dear baby brother." He winked at Mors with exaggerated flair. Mors couldn't help but chuckle. For a moment, his earlier worries melted away. After the laughter subsided and conversation settled, Elia leaned back and said thoughtfully, "Did anyone else notice the way Doran looked at Mors?" Oberyn poured himself more wine, feigning indifference. "Jealousy, I'd say. I would be too, if I saw hair that silver and eyes that sharp." Elia ignored him. "No, it was different. He said something to Mother, and then she looked at you." She turned her gaze on Mors. "Do you know what that was about?" Mors shook his head. "Not a clue." Manfredi looked between them. Maybe more marriage proposals arrived. Or maybe someone spotted a new scandal brewing in court, Oberyn offered with a grin. "If it's a matter of love, I'm available. I fix hearts and break rules." "You break heads more than hearts," Elia muttered. Still, the unease lingered. Whatever had passed between Doran and Lorza hadn't been idle and they all knew it. The next morning, Mors rose early. Sun's pair was still in those quiet hours, the heat not yet oppressive, the hallways bathed in soft, golden light. He moved through the palace like a shadow, making his way toward the training yard. 6 months of courtesies and political posturing had left his limbs aching for motion. As he approached, the rhythmic clash of sparring met his ears. "Luin! Maron!" And someone else. Mors paused beneath the archway. The stranger was tall, perhaps an inch or two taller than Lewin and Maron, with broad shoulders and a grounded, deliberate stance. His face was square-jawed and lined with age. Dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples, clung damp to his brow. Despite the years, he moved with the honed precision of a man long accustomed to violence. He was sparring with Sir Lewin Martell. Maron stood nearby, observing from the shade. Lewin and the stranger circled each other like predators. Neither spoke. Their silence was sharp, their eyes locked in the language of warriors too experienced for empty words. Lewin struck first, quick as a viper, his spear slicing through the air. The stranger caught the blow on his shield, grunting, then swept low with his sword, aiming to unbalance. Lewin skipped back, light on his feet despite the weight of his armor and age. The stranger advanced, his long sword flashing in a clean arc. Lewin twisted aside, letting the blade pass, and rammed the butt of his spear into the man's ribs. The impact cracked like a staff against stone. The stranger staggered but did not fall. A grim smile flickered across his face. "I can read you better now," he muttered. Lewin's eyes narrowed. "Getting cocky, are we?" They clashed again. Steel screamed. The stranger fought like a soldier, grounded, disciplined, economical. Lewin, like a Dornish prince, fluid, agile, unpredictable. One was forged in battlefields, the other in sun and sand. Minutes passed. Neither yielded. Lewin feinted high, then dropped into a sweeping leg strike. The stranger narrowly leapt over it, pivoting in the air and slashing at Lewin's thigh on the way down. The blade nicked cloth no more. Lewin hissed and jabbed with his spear. The stranger slapped it aside with his shield and charged in, too close for the spear's reach. His pommel arced toward Lewin's jaw. Lewin ducked and drove an elbow into his gut. They staggered back, panting. Sweat gleamed on their faces. Bruises bloomed like paint. A cut bled at the stranger's temple. Lewin's lip was split. But neither looked ready to yield. Mors had crept closer, drawn in by the display. He was almost at the edge of the yard when the stranger looked up and froze. His jaw slackened. His breath caught. His expression shifted, haunted, almost reverent. In the same instant, Lewin pivoted and landed a clean strike across the stranger's face. The man's left eye began to swell as the spar came to a sudden halt. The stranger shot Lewin a resentful look. Lewin just chuckled and stepped back without apology, especially once he saw Mors standing nearby. Maron sighed. Apparently, these kinds of interruptions had become routine in their absence. He stepped forward. "Mors. You're early. Good." He turned slightly, gesturing to the stranger. "This is Sir Jeremy Norwich. He was a close friend of your father. He's come to Sunspear to see you." Mors blinked. "My father?" Jeremy seemed to stir from his trance, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Durin Targaryen," he said, his voice gravelly. "I rode with him. Fought beside him. We were friends. The best of friends." There was a hesitation on the word too heavy to ignore. Lewin said nothing but watched the interaction with a sharp gaze. Jeremy added, "If you have time, I'd walk with you." Mors nodded, curiosity outweighing the wariness. This man, apparently a friend of his father, had just gone toe-to-toe with Sir Lewin Martell, captain of the Spears of the Sun and one of the most formidable fighters Mors had ever seen. And he'd come all this way, for him? Mors was intrigued. Chapter 14, Chapter 13, A Sword for the Sun. A few moments later, they walked the perimeter of the sparring ring. Jeremy moved like a man shaped by decades of training, precise, controlled, never flashy. "I loved him," Jeremy said quietly. Mors stopped mid-step, turning sharply toward him. "Wait, you mean you and my father were?" Jeremy let out a soft chuckle. "Yes. Matters of the heart are rarely something we control." He paused before adding, "He was betrothed, you know, to Olenna Redwine." Yes, the mother of the current Lord of the Reach. Mors blinked. Seriously. Fortunately, she wasn't too keen on it, and neither was Durin. They both had sharp tongues. Too sharp for each other. Mors furrowed his brow. Then how did I happen? Jeremy's expression softened. Your mother, Durin, and I were close, very close. When Lorza's first husband died, Durin wanted to comfort her. Your grandfather, King Aegon, saw an opportunity to draw Dorne closer to the crown and suggested they marry. It was meant to be platonic, a gesture of support. But wine, grief, and old affection. He shrugged. Well, you can imagine the rest. Mors just nodded slowly, still processing. Jeremy's voice dipped, touched with reverence. He was light and fire, foolish and brilliant. He didn't see the world as it was, he saw it as it could be. I admired him for that. Maybe I loved him for it. He glanced at Mors deeply, as if seeing someone else. Then he spoke, not like a soldier recalling a tale, but like a man confessing a sin. And then he died. So many of them did, chasing his father's ambitions. They called it the tragedy at Summerhall. I wasn't there with him. I should have been. But I wasn't. He paused, voice thickening. I think the real tragedy for me was that he died while I lived. He paused. I was away retrieving a gift. A spear, Dornish forged from ironwood, black and red. It was meant to symbolize what we were. By the time I returned, there was only ash. Jeremy stopped walking. I thought about dying. Thought about it a lot. But then I learned your mother was pregnant. Who would have thought? He let out a dry chuckle. I stayed. I wanted to witness the legacy of Durin before I made any decisions. He exhaled slowly. But when you were born, when I saw your face, your features, I realized maybe I still had a purpose. I foolishly asked Lorza to let me take you to King's Landing, to raise you there with your Targaryen kin. His smile faded. She refused, wisely. Said you were a Martell. That this was your home. He gave a sad smile. And she was right. Princes aren't raised by grieving ghosts. Mors exhaled slowly. So you left? Jeremy nodded. I did. Wandered for a while. Eventually went east, free cities, Basilisk Isles, disputed lands. Spent 4 years with the Second Sons. Trained. Fought. Learned how to lead. Studied tactics, languages, things I never knew I lacked. I didn't want to just be a dashing knight. I wanted to become someone worthy. Someone who could stand beside you. He stopped again. Then he knelt. If you'll have me, I pledge my sword to you. Not to House Martell. Not to Dorne. To you, Prince Mors Martell of House Martell, son of Prince Durin Targaryen. He continued, voice steady with conviction. I offer my service, Prince Mors. I will shield your back and keep your counsel, give my life for yours if need be. I swear it by the old gods and the new. Mors stared. No one had ever offered him that, not like this. But he understood the weight of what was being given. He straightened, his voice clear. Then hear my vow, he said after a moment. You shall always have a place at my hearth, meat at my table. I swear never to ask for dishonorable service. I swear it by the old gods and the new. He took a breath. Arise. And serve with honor. Jeremy stood, his face composed but deeply moved. Luwin, who had been trailing them to ensure Mors's safety, gave a short nod and stepped back to give them space. Now that Jeremy had sworn himself to Mors, he'd allowed himself to ease up, if only a little. As they sat along the edge of the training yard, cooling down with water and dates after their walk and conversation, Jeremy finally spoke. I've heard you're something special with a blade, he said. Luwin couldn't stop praising you. Said he's rarely if ever seen potential and progress like yours. Especially at your age. Mors gave a small chuckle. I've been improving fast, but it's not enough. He paused, then added, I also lost nearly 6 months because of the tour. Mors's voice dipped briefly, but he moved on before the silence could settle. Besides the bruise on your eye, why do you have so many others? They all look fresh. Mors' tone was casual, with light amusement, but after watching the earlier sparring match between Jeremy and Luwin, he already had his suspicions. Jeremy laughed low, dry and wry. Luwin, he said simply. He wasn't exactly thrilled to see me again. Called me a deserter. Said I abandoned Lorza. Questioned whether I was still worth anything with a sword. He stretched his shoulder with a grunt. So we fought. Sparred every day. Sometimes twice. He hits hard. But I hit back. He gave Mors a crooked smile. I've come a long way over the years. I can even beat Luwin now, well, occasionally. Mors smirked. So he respects you now. Jeremy shrugged with a chuckle. I've known Luwin a long time, hard to read, that one. But he's been glaring at me less lately. I'll take it as progress. Mors studied him for a moment. You said you wanted to raise me. Why? Jeremy's expression sobered. The truth is, I wanted you to have the same chances he did. I'll admit I still had my biases about Dorne. But Lorza set me straight. And when I saw you, I saw Durin. He paused, then added more quietly. But now I see it clearly, you carry him with you. I see it in your stance, your eyes. But there's more. Something still taking shape. Something powerful. Mors sat in silence for a moment, letting the words settle. Then Mors nodded. Moving forward. I'll need your help. I'll be depending on you. Jeremy met his gaze and saw it, that weight Mors carried, invisible to others but unmistakable to him. He nodded once, firm and without hesitation. Gladly. That evening, as the halls of Sun's Pair quieted, Mors walked the corridor that passed the family's solar. He slowed. Voices carried. Maron. He's doing it deliberately. King Aerys is backing Volantis, pouring coin into their trade war with Myr and Tyrosh. Just to contradict Tywin's counsel. Doran responded, calm but measured. He's growing unpredictable. Tywin knows it. That's why he tried to step down as Hand. Even now, after losing his wife, Aerys refuses to let him resign. If Myr and Tyrosh retaliate with piracy, Maron said, it'll start with attacks on the shipping lanes. Stepstones first. That's our doorstep. Mors stepped through the doorway. Then we prepare now, he said. Both men turned. Doran offered a faint smile. You know, little brother, it's not polite to eavesdrop. The door was open, so. Mors replied with a shrug. Maron nodded. Then understand this, our King Aerys has been acting erratically. Volantis is only the beginning. And whatever we may think of Tywin Lannister, he's an excellent hand. This is self-sabotage. Doran crossed his arms. We don't know if this ends in war. But if it does, we can't be caught off guard. Maron added, I'll speak to Lorza. I'm going to King's Landing. Someone has to speak sense to the small council. Mors nodded slowly. He didn't voice it, but the thought was already forming. Something was coming. And he still had a long way to go. As Mors stepped into his room, he noticed something new, something that hadn't been there before. A long shape rested atop his bed, carefully wrapped in cloth. He approached it slowly, noting a small folded note tucked beneath the wrappings. He picked it up. To Mors. From Jeremy. So that you can carry a piece of the legacy your father couldn't. Mors stilled. He peeled back the cloth and stopped breathing for a moment. The spear lay before him, over 7 feet long. Its shaft was carved from dense northern ironwood, polished to a dark, gleaming finish like black glass. Intricate etchings ran up from the base, subtle, winding flame-like patterns burned into the grain. The spearhead was castle-forged steel, shaped in the elegant leaf blade style favored in Dorne for both thrusting and slashing. Its edges shimmered faintly with a reddish hue like tempered embers caught in sunlight. Just below the socket, an inlaid emblem gleamed, a silver sun wrapped in twin dragon wings. Tied beneath the blade, a tassel of black and crimson silk House Targaryen's colors braided in Dornish fashion, swayed in the breeze drifting in from the balcony. It moved like fire. More than a weapon, it was a shard of memory, a bond of blood, a promise reborn. Mors held it firmly in both hands, then walked to the window, the wind lifting the tassel behind him like a banner. Chapter 15, Chapter 14, Ashes in the Current. 3 months had passed since the courtship tour ended. The winds had shifted. Prince Mors Martell had sailed to King's Landing a month after their return, hoping to persuade the small council to reject supporting Volantis in its growing conflict across the narrow sea. Tywin Lannister, ever shrewd, had advised the crown to remain neutral. But whether out of arrogance or spite, King Aerys had chosen to back Volantis. The consequences were already being felt. Pirate activity in the Stepstones had surged in recent weeks, likely fueled by proxy retaliation from Myr or Tyrosh. 3 weeks ago, Mors had written from the capital. Despite all his efforts, the council had remained divided. There had been no progress. He and Elia were preparing to return to Dorne, unsuccessful. Back in Dorne, things moved forward. Oberyn and Manfredi had officially joined the Spears of the Sun, riding west with Lewin Martell to begin a months-long sweep through the Red Mountains to root out the raider remnants that had ambushed the caravan the previous year. The campaign was harsh and bloody but necessary. And both boys had wanted it. Mors had stayed behind. Lorza remained firm in her decision that he wouldn't officially join the Spears until he turned 14. In the meantime, he trained daily with Sir Jeremy Norridge, his father's old companion. The two had grown close. Training yard in Sun's pair. The sun had begun its steady climb when Mors and Jeremy stepped into the training yard. The sand was warm beneath their boots, and a faint sea breeze stirred the banners above the ramparts. Lewin watched from the shade, arms crossed, silent as a hawk. They faced one another, prince and knight each armed with blunted training weapons, Jeremy with a longsword, Mors with a Dornish spear. The opening was cautious. Jeremy moved with measured precision, gauging Mors's rhythm. But Mors didn't wait. He surged forward with youthful speed, his spear slicing in a tight arc toward Jeremy's shoulder. The knight caught the blow on his blade easy, but his brows lifted slightly, though he was no longer surprised by the force behind it. Mors pressed the attack. He spun, kicked off his back foot, and swept low, forcing Jeremy to hop back or risk being knocked off balance. The boy was light on his feet, agile and relentless. Every motion spoke of a body honed by discipline and hunger. His strikes carried more intent than most men twice his age. Jeremy adjusted quickly, parrying a thrust and twisting into a counter. Mors ducked under it, rolled across the sand, and rose into guard. He wasn't just fast, he adapted. His footwork still had rough edges, but it was precise. Sharper than it had any right to be at 13. They exchanged a flurry of blows, spear clacking against sword, boots grinding across the sand. Mors feinted high, then stepped in and drove the butt of his spear toward Jeremy's ribs. It landed not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to make the older man grunt and give ground. Jeremy grinned. "All right, then." He responded with a low sweeping strike that caught Mors off guard. The boy stumbled, but turned the fall into a controlled roll and came up kicking, striking toward Jeremy's knee. It didn't land, but it could have. Jeremy answered with a mock punch that Mors narrowly dodged. Both stepped back, breathing hard from the spar, though Mors was visibly less. He wiped the sweat from his brow and gave a single nod of approval. "Your instincts keep getting sharper. Your talent's honestly unnatural, gods-defying speed, the strength of a career blacksmith. But after 3 months, it's your stamina that's really started to impress me." Mors caught his breath, then grinned. I was worried the tour might have dulled me, lost a lot of training time. But the progress over the last 3 months, it's been frightening, even to me. Ario, still watching from the shade, gave a low grunt. You've improved. All around. Mors rolled his eyes. You still hold back in our spars. Ario gave a simple nod. Naturally. Mors's eye twitched slightly. Even after a few months, he still couldn't tell if the 6 feet 8 inches, 203 centimeters, behemoth was being smug, sarcastic, or something else entirely. Jeremy looked at Mors again longer this time, almost like a father seeing more than just skill. No. He's more than improving. He's something special. He sheathed the training sword. That's enough for today. I'm testing a possible recruit for your personal guard. Mors had begun sharing elements of his own fighting style techniques drawn from his past life. He called it Dornish martial arts to avoid raising too many questions. Jeremy, intrigued by the unique and ruthless method, picked it up quickly. Together, they had begun drafting plans to form a specialized personal guard for Mors, with Jeremy as its captain. The idea was simple, a compact, elite unit built around speed, precision, and adaptability. Jeremy had already started scouting for promising recruits. Ario Hota occasionally joined their training sessions. Though he rarely spoke, his precision and fluid control, especially given his massive frame, had impressed even Jeremy. Over time, both Jeremy and Mors had earned his quiet respect. Off the training grounds, Mors spent time with Ario, Elia, and Dornish, often sharing quiet afternoons over tea or light meals. Lorza joined them when her court duties allowed. Jeremy and Lorza also found time to catch up when they could, usually over wine or the occasional dinner. Later that morning, the sun was warm, the air gentle with the scent of orange blossom. They sat in the Garden of the Sun, a shaded marble courtyard ringed with flowering trees. Ario poured honeyed tea for Elia and Mors, while Dornish spoke softly to Lorza about the spear's progress against the mountain raiders. Until the sound of rapid footsteps broke the peace. The Maester, a wiry, pale-skinned man named Maester Othmar, rushed into the garden, his robes half loosened and scrolls bouncing against his satchel. "Your Grace," he gasped, I have an urgent message." Lorza raised a hand calmly. "Compose yourself, Maester. You're a grown man, not a page. Let me see it." Maester Othmar hesitated, swallowing hard. His hands trembled as he extended the sealed letter. Lorza broke the wax and began reading. Her face, steady as stone a moment ago, began to drain of color. Then her fingers twitched. The letter slipped from her grasp. A low whisper escaped her lips. "No." And she collapsed. Elia cried out as Dornish caught Lorza before she struck the ground. Ario and Elia rushed to her side. Mors was already kneeling, supporting her head. Maester Othmar scrambled forward, breath catching in his throat. He checked her pulse, then exhaled slowly. "She's only fainted," he said. "I can have her awake shortly, just let me." He rummaged through his satchel. But Dornish had picked up the fallen letter. He read silently, his hand gripping the parchment tighter with each line. When he finished, he stood slowly, holding the letter like it had weight. "No," he said, quieter now. "Let her rest a moment. It might be, for the best." Mors looked up sharply. "Dornish, what is it?" Dornish stared straight ahead, voice steady but heavy. "We've received word from House Sant Agar." Everyone went quiet. There was an attack off the coast of Spotswood. Pirates struck Mayron's ship. He paused. He fought hard. But his wounds, he died of them before he could make landfall. Duran's mouth moved, but the next words came barely above a whisper. "Uncle Maron is dead." Elia broke down into sobs, clutching Ario's arm as she wept. Ario herself gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in shock. Mors didn't speak. His jaw clenched. His hands closed into fists. His chest rose sharply. Heat flushed through his body, unrelenting and cold at once. His uncle, the man who had ridden at the head of the tour, who had quietly guided Mors since childhood, who had never hesitated to stand in front of danger, was gone. Murdered by cowards and thieves with no banners. His eyes lowered. The table shook beneath his clenched fists. And then something changed. Everyone felt it. Dornish blinked. A strange clarity rushed into his mind, sharp and sudden. The fatigue in his limbs began to melt away. His focus sharpened. He felt stronger. He looked at Mors with surprise. It wasn't just him. Melario sat up straighter. Elia looked startled, her tearful eyes briefly wide with alertness. In that moment of clarity, Dornish turned and caught it. A glint. Maester Othmar, staring at Mors not with concern, but with something colder. Calculating. Predatory. There was a flicker of something else too, something darker. Like malice barely hidden. Duran's eyes narrowed. That glint didn't belong. His face hardened, the warmth gone from his features. Something ruthless settled behind his eyes. But then Lorza stirred. A soft gasp escaped her lips. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered open. Mors, still at her side, steadied her as she came to. Lorza's breath came in quick bursts. Her voice cracked, raw with emotion. We need to. Mother, Dornish said firmly, stepping in. You need rest. Everything else can wait. Let me handle it. At that moment, Sir Jeremy entered the garden, still half-armored from sparring with Ario. His face tightened when he saw the tension in the room. Sir Jeremy, Dornish said. Please escort my mother to her quarters. Jeremy nodded at once, moving beside Lorza with careful hands. Then Dornish turned to the Maester. Maester Othmar, go with them. Prepare a light dose of milk of the poppy for her grace. Nothing strong. Just enough to ease her nerves. Othmar hesitated, then bowed stiffly and followed. Duran's gaze didn't waver. Cold. Unblinking. Mors watched it all, his head still spinning. And then the weight hit him. A sudden, heavy fatigue deeper than any he'd felt after training. His limbs ached. His chest felt hollow. Like something inside had been drawn out. He straightened, then swayed. Brother. He said softly. Did something happen? Did I do something? Dornish turned to him, eyes softer now but still unreadable. I'm not completely sure, he said. But everything shifted when your emotions did. That wasn't a coincidence, was it? He stepped forward and placed a hand on Mors's shoulder. Don't think on it too hard now. We'll talk later after I take care of something. Then he turned to where Ario Hota stood, silent and alert. Dornish leaned in, whispered something only Ario could hear. The big man's expression darkened instantly. His usual calm turned sharp. Dangerous. Ario gave a small nod, then stepped away. Dornish kissed Melario gently on the temple. Stay with Mors. Help him to his quarters, he needs rest. I'll be back soon. She nodded, already reaching for Mors's arm. Dornish and Ario strode off together, their footsteps measured but heavy with purpose. Mors tried to rise, but staggered. Melario caught him without hesitation, then called out softly. Two handmaidens rushed to help, guiding him gently inside. As they walked, Mors felt the pressure still humming in his chest. The grief was there. The anger too. But something else had awakened with it. That wasn't normal, he thought, recalling the way the air had shifted, how everyone around him had reacted like something had passed through all of them. Even Dornish had noticed. They all felt it. And deep down, he was certain it was tied to the power inside him, the aura he'd kept hidden. Looks like it's time I talk to the family about it. Chapter 16, Chapter 15, The Prince of Dorne. Mors woke to a shaft of sunlight cutting across his face. The room was quiet, too quiet. He blinked slowly, then sat up, confused. The sun had already climbed high late morning, nearly noon. Strange. I never sleep this long. He rubbed his face, frowning. As he moved, something felt off. Not wrong, but different. His limbs still held a trace of fatigue, but underneath that, there was something else. More strength. He stood, stretching experimentally. His balance had shifted, subtly. His body felt heavier in the best way, denser, more alive. He flexed his fingers. Jumped once, landing in a crouch. His muscles responded instantly. Could it be that my aura wasn't fully awake before? And yesterday's events triggered something. The question hung in his mind until the dizziness hit. It wasn't overwhelming, but enough to make him pause. He sat back on the bed. Testing can wait. I need to recover properly first. A sudden knock. Then the door burst open. Morica, one of the palace maids, rushed in, clearly breathless. My prince. Are you well? I heard a noise. Are you hurt? Mors offered a half smile. I'm fine, thanks, Morica. Just a little hungrier than usual. She exhaled in relief. Lunch will be ready soon, but if you want something light. Please. That would help. A short while later, with the tray of fruit, bread, and lemon water finished, Mors made his way to the family solar. Dorne stood over maps, studying the stepstones with Melario. Ario Hotal lingered like a statue nearby, eyes scanning the room with silent vigilance. But his mother and Jeremy were absent. That worried him. As Mors entered, Dorne turned, and a long, quiet breath left him. Thank the gods, Dorne said. You're awake. Mors offered a faint nod. Still tired. But strangely. I feel better than before. Dorne raised a brow but said nothing. Mors sat in a chair, gaze shifted. Mother. Duran's expression darkened slightly. She's not as well as she pretends. Joanna's death. Mayron's, it's too much. She was restless all night, calling out names of the dead in her sleep. Without Jeremy, I don't know how she would have made it through the night. Mors blinked. Jeremy. Dorne nodded. He's been guarding Mother's quarters. Hasn't left her side once. I didn't realize they were that close. I did, Mors thought silently. Or I suspected. Dorne continued, voice quiet. She's had more milk of the poppy, but it's been hard without Maester Orthar. What do you mean? Duran's voice flattened. He had an accident last night. He didn't make it. Mors stared. Then he caught it. A flicker of something sharp in Duran's eyes. Cruelty? Rage? It was gone in a second, but Mors saw it. He said nothing. Dorne hesitated, then added, we're also not certain about Aunt Melie. What? Mors straightened. You mean she might be alive? Dorne didn't answer immediately. Her body hasn't been found. We can't rule anything out. Silence swept the room. Melario stood and took Duran's hand. Her presence was steady, even though her eyes were glassy. She knew her husband's heart better than most, and she could feel the storm brewing beneath his calm. Mors stood sharply, fists clenched. Fury surged through him, not just at the pirates, but at the free cities, at the crown, at the realm itself. The walls trembled faintly. Everyone in the room felt it, an invisible wave of heat and pressure, like a sudden shift in gravity. Then it was gone. Mors blinked down at his hands. His muscles twitched, he felt a sudden and sharp increase in strength, almost like a boost of raw energy. Then the strength vanished as quickly as it came. He staggered and sank into a chair. Ario moved instantly. Melario reached for him. I'm fine, Mors muttered. Dorne watched him, eyes sharp with calculation. Then he exhaled. That, whatever that was. It wasn't normal. Mors said nothing. Doran continued, tone thoughtful as he looked out the window. I searched through some of our records last night. Our Valyrian blood is thin. There's no record of anything like this, no strength, no speed, no aura, no magical precedent of any kind. We've never had the chance to try taming a dragon, so there's no record of that either. Whatever you possess, it's unrecorded. Unique to you. He paused. But we have more pressing matters for now. We'll speak of this again. Tonight. In my solar. Mors nodded. Doran shifted the conversation. I've sent word to Luin about Maron and Melee. Manfredi will be devastated. And Oberyn, well. You know how he is. Mors said nothing, but looked down in thought. We've also written to the small council about the pirate threat. But I don't expect much to come of it. Mors's jaw clenched. Then we'll handle it ourselves. Doran studied him a moment. Then gave a slow, grim nod. Yes. I think we should. But not yet. Let Mother recover first. A decision like this needs our ruler to decide. We'll move when the time is right. The solar smelled of ink and old cedar. A low flame flickered in the hearth, casting restless shadows across the sandstone walls. Scrolls lay stacked on the long table, most left untouched. Doran stood by the window, arms folded behind his back, watching the darkening sky roll in over Sun's pair. The breeze was cool but carried an ominous edge. Mors stepped inside, quiet but not cautious. He could feel it, tonight's conversation would not be casual. Doran turned at the sound of the door closing behind him. I think you're old enough for this, he said in a low voice. He gave a wry smile. You've shown more discipline, more strategic sense, more restraint than most men twice your age. Even Oberyn, though gods help me, that isn't a high bar. Mors exhaled softly, a hint of humor in his voice. Yet, he's a unique case, that one. Doran chuckled, then let the humor fade. I killed Maester Orthar. Mors blinked. No build-up. No justification. Just the truth, dropped like a blade between them. I noticed something wrong in his eyes, Doran continued, his voice tightening. Too much interest. Too much calculation. So I took Ario. We paid him a visit. And we persuaded him to talk. A pause. No apology in his tone, just weariness. The realm outside Dorne is dangerous enough. But you? You're something else entirely. Just your Targaryen blood makes you a target. But now, your gifts are drawing attention. Dangerous attention. He stepped closer, eyes sharp. You don't know this, but in the last 3 years or so, we've stopped 3 assassination attempts against you. Mors didn't respond at first. His eyes widened, locking onto Doran in stunned silence. Doran nodded slowly. I didn't expect you to know. That was the point. The first came shortly after your accident, poison in your water. The rest, we stopped before they could act. But I can't say how many more might still be hiding around us. Doran turned to Mors fully now. We found poison 3 kinds in the Maester's quarters. Hidden compartments. There were also notes, assessments. Incomplete, thank the gods. Observations about your recovery, your strength, how quickly you were healing. He paused. I don't believe the reports were ever sent. But I can't be certain. He admitted under pressure that he'd shared some details of your progress. He didn't name who, but... Doran exhaled sharply. My guess is the Citadel. Mors sat, slowly. His hands gripped the edge of the chair. They really saw me as that much of a threat. Doran didn't answer. But he'd heard the stories, whispers of how the Citadel dealt with magic, and those who dared wield it. He also remembered troubling reports boys dying in Planky Town under mysterious circumstances. He murmured to himself, almost too softly to hear, "This might go deeper than I thought." But Mors caught it. His brow furrowed though he said nothing. After a moment, he changed course. "You're building a personal guard with Jeremy, yes?" Mors nodded. "We've started. He was supposed to evaluate a promising recruit yesterday, but everything got derailed." "Good. Make sure it includes people skilled in assassination, countermeasures, interrogation. You need people who think like assassins and know how to find them." He hesitated, then added, "I'll help with that." Mors looked at him with something unreadable, as if seeing something for the first time he hadn't let himself believe until now. Doran caught it and smiled faintly. "I know." "Surprised, hey? Just remember it takes more than honor to stay unbowed, unbent, and unbroken. Especially when the might of 6 Kingdoms 7, if you count the Riverlands, comes to conquer you, led by dragon riders." He paused, his voice softening. "Everything I know. I learned from Mother." Mors nodded dumbly once. "I see." And for the first time, he saw Doran not just as his brother but as a man shaped to lead, trained to fight, and willing to do whatever was necessary to ensure Dorne's survival and success. He saw him truly as the Prince of Dorne. Chapter 17, Chapter 16, The Brewing Storm. There was silence in the room. Doran turned back to the window, voice steady. "I said all this so you'd understand the truth. This isn't just talent. What happened yesterday and today, this is something else entirely." He turned again. His eyes were quiet, but firm. "This is magic, Mors. I never believed in it before. But I do now." Silence passed between them. The fire crackled once. Then Mors spoke. "It started with the fall," he said. "After I woke, things just changed. I was stronger. Faster. I healed quicker. I could think more clearly. React better. Everything felt sharper. And the more I trained, the more it grew. Like it amplified my growth the harder I pushed." Doran nodded, almost to himself. "So that explains the unusual training routines." Mors winced slightly. "Some were stupid. Swimming in quicksand might have been ill-advised." Doran chuckled. "And suicidal." Mors smirked, then continued. "Over time, I started to notice something else. When I trained with others, if I really focused, really got into it, they got better too. Faster. Sharper. More in sync." Doran straightened. "You projected it." "Not intentionally," Mors said. "But it happened. And it drained me faster when it did. Not enough to collapse, but noticeable. I can sustain a light projection, indefinitely, as long as I don't push too hard." Doran's face shifted from intrigue to astonishment. "The applications, do you realize how valuable that is? Gods, you could empower entire units." "I haven't tested how far it can go," Mors admitted. "Yesterday and today were accidents. I lost control." Doran's expression darkened. "Then we need to be careful. You can't afford to misstep." Mors nodded, then hesitated. Doran saw it immediately. "There's more." Mors met his gaze, voice quieter now. "Today, after you mentioned Melee might still be alive, I felt something different. Stronger. Sharper. I didn't just project. I changed. My strength doubled. It felt like I tapped into a deeper layer." Doran blinked. For once, he looked completely unmoored. "You triggered it on emotion." "I think so," Mors said. "I wanted to be stronger. And I was. Just for a moment." Doran turned away and walked to the window again, gripping the edge of the frame. "That's gods. In a duel, in battle. It's not limitless, Mors interrupted. It drained me badly. But yes. It's real. Dorne stayed silent for a long moment. Then he turned. We need to train you. Immediately. Strategically. If this gets out, if someone catches wind of what you are before we're ready, they'll kill me, Mors said quietly. Yes, Dorne agreed grimly. Or worse, they might try to experiment on you. They let that settle. Then Dorne exhaled. I'll have to tell Mother. She needs to know. Mors nodded. Aside from her, we should tell the others too. Elia? Dorne asked. Yes. Oberyn. Luwin. Manfredi. Jeremy, obviously. He's completely loyal. Dorne didn't answer right away. His eyes narrowed slightly. He seems to be. I trust him, Mors said. Dorne nodded, reluctantly. Very well. And Melario, Mors added. Maybe even Ario. That gave Dorne pause. He stared at Mors for a long moment. I understand Melario, he said. But Ario? Why? Mors's voice was sure. Because he's loyal to her. And by extension, to you. His faith, his upbringing, it makes him incorruptible. And his strength? I've never seen anything like it. He could help train me. Sharpen the edge. Dorne nodded slowly. All right. That makes sense. Then it's settled. They stood there in silence, side by side, watching as clouds gathered beyond the window. The breeze picked up, cool and heavy. Thunder rumbled distantly just enough to set the glass humming. After a while, Dorne spoke again, softer now. I think we should prevent any marriage alliances for you, outside of Dorne. Mors turned slightly, surprised. You've always favored political alliances. Why? Doran's gaze stayed on the horizon. It's too dangerous. Outside our walls, no one will understand what you are. They'll try to control it. Or destroy it. Maybe the North would accept it. But the rest of the realm? They can't be trusted. He exhaled. Better to bind ourselves tighter to someone we can manage. The Danes. The Euronwoods, though I don't trust them. Not fully. But the Danes, they may be the key. Mors considered that. Then nodded. I'll follow your guidance. Dorne finally smiled again. Good. Go rest. We have hard days ahead. Mors inclined his head and turned to leave. But as he stepped into the hall, he caught a flash of white lightning over the distant sea. The rumble followed a few heartbeats later, low and ominous. He paused. A storm was brewing. 2 weeks had passed. Sun's pair, though never a quiet place, had taken on a hush in the wake of Mors Martell's death. Grief moved through the halls like a cautious ghost. Guards spoke softer. Courtiers walked slower. The echo of sandals against stone seemed to linger too long. Lewin Martell returned at last, the banner of the spears of the sun rippling behind him. He rode at the head of the column, Oberyn and Manfredi flanking him, their faces carved from fire and ash. Oberyn looked ready to kill something. Manfredi looked like he already had. A quiet funeral was held the next morning. Mors stood beside Dorne and Elia as they looked down on what remained of their uncle. One arm gone. Dozens of wounds, old and new. But clutched in his dead hand shattered glass from what must have been a Myrish noble's necklace. The pieces shimmered in the sunlight, too delicate for a battlefield. Mors stared at them, jaw clenched. He took something with him, even at the end. Lorza did not speak during the ceremony. She stood tall, but there was a thinness to her presence. As if part of her had already departed with Mors. That night, she retired early. Jeremy followed her, silent and steadfast. Luwin didn't linger. By dawn, he was gone riding out with an elite unit of the spears. No farewells. No ceremony. Just steel, silence, and grim determination. Dorne had forbidden Oberyn and Manfredi from joining him. "They're too volatile," he told Mors in the Solar. "Let Lewin scout first. Once we know where to strike, we strike hard." Oberyn stormed out the moment he heard. Manfredi didn't speak. He only stared, jaw clenched, before turning and walking away. Mors sighed softly. "Leave them to me. I'll try to contain their fury at least until we can unleash it properly." Later that afternoon, Mors found Oberyn and Manfredi pacing the practice yard like caged wolves. Rage had settled into their bones. Without a word, he grabbed a spear and stepped into the ring. "Both of you. Come at me." Oberyn blinked. "Together." Mors just nodded. The fight that followed was fast, brutal, and stunning. Spears blurred in the air. Sand exploded underfoot. Oberyn's speed, Manfredi's precision, both impressive, both relentless, but neither could break Mors's defense. He flowed like liquid iron, untouchable and unrelenting. When he finally disarmed Manfredi and twisted Oberyn to the ground, even the servants watching from the corridor gasped. Oberyn lay there, breathing hard, eyes wide. "What in the seven hells have you been eating?" Mors offered a hand. "Discipline." They both took it. Now under the shade, silence fell between them. At nearly 14, Mors stood eye to eye with Oberyn at 5 feet 11 inches, 180 centimeters, and was already an inch taller than Manfredi, who had reached 5 feet 10 inches, 178 centimeters. Mors broke the quiet, resting a hand on both their shoulders. "I'm as furious as you are," he said. "I want to avenge Uncle Maron and save or recover Aunt Melie, whatever it takes." He looked between them. "But we can't be divided. Not now. We need to focus. Let the anger build until we can unleash it together." Oberyn bristled. "We're going to skin them alive." Manfredi didn't speak, but he nodded grimly. Mors's voice lowered, firm and steady. "That we are. And more." He looked toward the horizon, his words steel. "They'll learn why Dorne is unbowed, unbent, and unbroken." 3 days later, a letter arrived from the hand of the king. It was wrapped in Lannister red and sealed with wax thick as blood. Dorne read it aloud in the council chamber. "The crown is grieved to hear of the passing of Lord Mors Martell. It acknowledges the tragic loss and recognizes the growing threat in the Stepstones. A fleet of 5 warships is being sent to assist in patrol and deterrence." Silence followed. 5 ships. Elia muttered. 5, Dorne confirmed, folding the parchment. Oberyn swore. Manfredi punched the stone wall hard enough to bleed. Lorza said nothing. Mors stood with folded arms, watching his mother. Her hands trembled faintly in her lap. "They'll never move for us," he thought bitterly. Even after all this, Dorne was still an afterthought to the rest of the realm. That evening, Dorne called a gathering in the main Solar. Lorza sat upright but pale. Jeremy stood at her back. Melario was present, as were Elia, Oberyn, and Manfredi. Dorne looked at them all, then nodded to Mors. "They deserve to know." Mors explained quietly, simply. The strength, the reflexes, the healing. The projection of his aura. The recent surge. He didn't embellish. When he finished, silence held the room. Oberyn's brow furrowed. "Wait, you've secretly been giving us a boost while we train." Mors cracked a smile. "Not intentionally." Even Lorza smiled faintly at that. Then her expression changed. "I cannot lead like this," she said softly. "I've tried to hold myself together, but I feel the cracks. I see ghosts in the halls. Hear Mayron's voice at night. I won't let my grief steer Dorne." She turned to Dorne. "I name you my hand. And Regent of Dorne. Until I recover fully, or choose to step down entirely or the gods take me." Doran's eyes widened. "Mother, Are you certain? Lorza nodded. More certain than I've been about anything in weeks. The next morning, Mors found Doran in the solar, hunched over military ledgers and campaign charts. I want in, he said simply. With the spears. All of it. Doran looked up, studying him for a long moment. I suppose denying you now would be pointless, he said at last. You're ready maybe more than most. He sighed, setting the quill aside. I know you haven't exactly been taking it easy, but this changes everything, Mors. You can still step back. Let us adults carry the burden. Mors shook his head, eyes steady. I won't change my mind. Doran watched him a moment longer, then gave a quiet nod. Very well. I'll approve your request. When Luin returns, I'll inform him. He paused. But one condition: Jeremy goes with you. Mors didn't hesitate. Done. 3 days later, Luin returned. They met in Lorza's private solar. She sat on a chaise, Jeremy beside her. Doran stood near the window. Elia was there, as were Oberyn and Manfrey. Mors leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Luin laid out maps and parchment. No sign of Meli's body. But we found Myrish weapons, trade seals, and several dead pirates with noble adornments. One had a ledger. It's in High Valyrian coded. But it links several raids to Myrish trade ports. Doran frowned. Not Tyrosh, then. Myr. Luin nodded. They've been funding these pirates for years. Doran looked at Lorza. This is no longer just a matter of vengeance. It's a matter of kingdoms. Mors stepped forward. Then let the kingdoms wait. The pirates die first. Doran's eyes gleamed. Well said. He turned to Luin. Uncle, do we know where they're based? Lower stepstones. A broken island chain. Deep harbors. Fortified. Doran turned to Lorza. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded, once slow and deliberate. Doran lifted his chin. Then, we go to war. Luin followed, voice like stone. We go to war. Oberyn's eyes burned. We go to war. Manfrey's voice was quieter, but firm. We go to war. Beside Lorza, Elia reached for her mother's hand. She didn't speak. But her fingers trembled. Mors stood still, watching them all. The weight of it settled into his bones. He exhaled, then murmured, then war it is. And in the silence that followed, thunder rumbled outside the tower. A storm was coming. And this time, Dorne would not weather it. It would ride it. End of Arc I, The Making of the Spear. Chapter 18, Interlude, Shadows Before the Spear. Early 270 AC POV, Luin Martell. The throne room of Sun's Pair was quieter than usual. Formal, orderly, but quieter. Luin Martell crossed the tiled floor with steady strides, dust still clinging to his boots from the road. He was dressed in the armor of the spears not for show, but because he hadn't stopped moving since dawn. He caught his brother's eye as he entered. Maron gave a curt nod. Luin responded with one of his own, then advanced to the foot of the dais and knelt before Princess Lorza. Your Grace, he said simply. The dispute between House Euronwood and House Fowler has been settled. Terms have been signed. No blades drawn. Lorza inclined her head, her expression unreadable but calm. Well done, Sir Luin. I expected nothing less. He stepped aside and moved to the shadowed wall beneath the eastern banners, arms folded as he waited for court to end. He didn't enjoy the pageantry. Never had. But some duties weren't optional. He scanned the gathered lords, their attendants, the flicker of embroidered cloaks, the rustle of soft shoes on stone. Everything here moved slower than the road, but the blades were better concealed. When court was finally dismissed, Lorza rose. Maron fell into step beside her. She didn't speak until they reached the entrance to her private solar, a place Lewin knew well: warm sandstone walls, thick rugs, a view that overlooked the gardens. When the door shut behind them, she exhaled deeply. Then she turned. "I've approved it," she said without ceremony. "The boys are to begin training with the spears." Lewin's brow rose. "Oberyn and Manfredi?" Lorza nodded. "Yes." "And Mors?" Lewin blinked. "Mors?" His voice carried no judgment, but it was edged with disbelief. "Forgive me, sister, but he's 10. He's always been watched more closely than the others, protected more fiercely. You told me once he wasn't meant for the field." Lorza's face shifted. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked to Maron. "Might as well find out now," he said with a small nod. Lorza returned her gaze to Lewin, and for a moment, she looked older. Not tired, not worn. Just waited. "Mors nearly died," she said softly. 2 moons ago. Racing on sand steeds with Oberyn and Manfredi. There was a fall bad. Neck snapped, they thought. But he survived. And not just survived. He recovered in days. Weeks later, he was stronger than before." Lewin frowned. "Maesters." They had no explanation. None that held water. She turned toward the window then, as if needing distance from her own words. "He's been different ever since. Sharper. Quieter. Stronger." Lewin stayed silent, but his shoulders stiffened. "That alone," Lorza continued, "would not have changed my mind. But it wasn't the only reason." She turned back to face him, and this time, her composure cracked just enough for him to see the fire behind it. "Someone tried to poison my son." Lewin didn't move. It took a beat to register. "Then, what?" She nodded, slowly, deliberately. "He was targeted. The food was laced, meant to look like a fever. Doran caught the one responsible. A low-ranking servant. Quiet. Clever." She exhaled sharply, and when she spoke again, her voice was steel. "He killed himself before we could make him talk, bit off his own tongue and choked on the blood before we got a name. Still, Doran has once again proven himself a capable master of whisperers, for Dorne, at least." Lewin stared at her. Then at Maron. Then back. "And you don't know who sent him?" Lorza's jaw tightened. "That's the worst part. We have no idea. It could have been a bribe. A plant. Spies from the water gardens. The Septon. Even the Citadel." Silence pressed down on the solar like a stone slab. Lewin's fists curled slowly at his sides. He didn't shout. Didn't curse. But the shift in his body was unmistakable: shoulders squared, jaw locked, eyes narrowed like a drawn bow. He looked like a man one step away from unsheathing something sharp. "Tell me where," he said quietly. "Give me a name, a direction. I'll handle the rest." Lorza didn't answer. There was nothing to give. She only said, "I've already started tightening security. The guards will be vetted, the servants reviewed. No one enters the water gardens or Sun's Pair without clearance. Doran will see to it." Lewin exhaled through his nose, still glaring at the floor like he could burn it to ash with enough will. Then, slowly, he lifted his eyes. "Do you want me to pass them?" It was quiet. Honest. No edge of sarcasm. No mockery. Just a soldier asking if this was a mission or a formality. Lorza actually laughed. A brittle, tired sound. "By the gods, no. If they're to earn their place, they earn it. I just wanted you to know what's at stake. They fail, they stay here. They're still boys," she added. "But boys who know how to fight are harder to kill." Maron folded his arms, finally speaking again. "I've already started them on basic drills. You'll be surprised." Lewin looked between them. He didn't speak for a while. Then he nodded once, slow and deliberate. Very well. I'll test them. All three. He turned toward the door, pausing just before leaving. If anyone else tries to harm them. His voice dropped low. They won't get a second chance to choke. Late 272 AC POV, Mors Martell. The solar of Casterly Rock was draped in silence when they entered. Only the faint crackle of the dying fire broke the stillness. The windows had been shuttered despite the daylight. The hearth burned low, casting long shadows across polished stone, yet the room still felt cold. Tywin Lannister sat alone behind his broad lion-carved desk, a ledger closed before him, his hands steepled. Kevin stood beside him, stiff as a pillar, saying nothing. When Princess Mors Martell and Prince Mors of Dorne stepped into the room, Tywin did not rise. He only stared. A long, unreadable look. The kind of stare a lion might give when deciding whether something was food or furniture. Lorza met it with equal stillness. Mors bowed first, followed by Lorza's brief, regal nod. After a beat, Tywin finally spoke. Princess. Prince. Welcome to Casterly Rock, he said, voice dry as parchment. I regret the timing of your visit. It was a formality. Nothing more. Lorza's expression didn't shift. We regret it as well, Lord Tywin. And we offer our sincerest condolences. Lady Joanna was, deeply respected. Mors added, and dearly missed. Her memory shines even in Dorne. For a moment, something flickered in Tywin's eyes. Pain? Recognition? It was impossible to say. But then it vanished beneath a steel gaze. She spoke fondly of you, Tywin said, voice tight. Though I suspect she underestimated your resolve. Lorza didn't rise to it. We honored each other as women with duty on our shoulders. And we understood how rare that was. Tywin gave a small, sharp nod, then looked to Mors briefly as he answered a question about the road, the weather, the arbor wines, whatever had been pouring from Mairon's mouth with practiced ease. Kevin watched quietly. He was always the gentler of the two, but still stone in moments like this. Finally, Tywin raised a hand. Enough. The room stilled. He turned his gaze on Lorza again, eyes gleaming faintly in the firelight. What do you want? The question dropped like a blade. Not even dressed up as diplomacy. Lorza, for a moment, said nothing. Then she inhaled slowly. I came because Joanna once spoke of the possibility of tying our houses more closely. Through our children. We both agreed that. Tywin cut her off with a breath through the nose. Sharp. Controlled. I am aware of what she said. Joanna spoke of many things. He leaned back slightly, gaze fixed like a crossbow bolt. But the truth, Princess, is this: Cersei will not be tied to Dorne.